The bruise was small, barely visible beneath the cuff of her white sleeve. But to Dominic Reyes, it screamed louder than any confession. He'd built an empire on reading people, on knowing when someone was lying, hiding, breaking. And the quiet waitress who'd served his table for 3 months, she was shattering. Someone had put hands on her. Someone thought they could get away with it. They were wrong. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The crystal chandeliers of Augusto's cast fractured light across tables draped in white linen, each one occupied by Washington's elite. Senators with mistresses, lobbyists brokering deals over 30-year scotch, judges who'd forgotten what justice actually meant. The restaurant existed in that peculiar space where power dressed itself in civility, where handshakes could authorize wars and whispered conversations could topple careers. Dominic Reyes sat at his usual corner table, positioned with military precision so his back faced the wall and his eyes commanded the entire room. At 42, he carried authority like a second skin. Tailored charcoal suit, silver cufflinks that cost more than most people's monthly rent, dark hair touched with distinguished gray at the temples. To the casual observer, he might have been another successful businessman enjoying an expensive meal. They would have been catastrophically wrong. Dominic Reyes was the most dangerous man in Washington, D.C., possibly on the entire eastern seaboard. He didn't deal in the performative violence of street gangs or the desperate brutality of small-time criminals. His empire was built on precision, strategy, and an understanding that real power operated in shadows. Construction contracts that laundered millions, political favors that shifted policy, information networks that knew everyone's secrets. People feared him not because he was loud, but because he was inevitable. "Mr. Reyes, your usual?" The voice was soft, professional, carefully modulated to be pleasant without being presumptuous. He looked up at Naomi Carter, and something in his chest tightened with a sensation he couldn't immediately name. She'd been working at Augusto's for 3 months now. Dominic noticed everything. It was how he stayed alive. So he'd cataloged her presence from the first shift. Mid-20s, maybe 26 or 27. Natural beauty that she seemed determined to minimize. Brown hair always pulled back in a severe bun. Minimal makeup. Posture that suggested she wanted to take up as little space as possible. She moved through the restaurant like a ghost, efficient and nearly invisible. But tonight, something was different. "Naomi." He used her name deliberately, watched her eyes widen slightly in surprise that he knew it. "The Dover Soul, yes. And tell Marcus I want the 2015 Chassagne Montrachet, not whatever he's been trying to pass off lately." The smallest smile touched her lips, there and gone in an instant. "I'll make sure he knows you're on to him." She turned to leave, and that's when he saw it. The sleeve of her white blouse had ridden up perhaps half an inch as she reached for his menu. Just enough to reveal the edge of something dark against her skin, purple-black, the distinctive color of a healing bruise. His hand moved before his brain fully processed the action, catching her wrist with a gentleness that contradicted the sudden ice in his veins. "Who did that to you?" Naomi froze. For a moment she didn't breathe, didn't move, a deer caught in headlights that had already decided her fate. Then she carefully extracted her wrist from his grip, tugging the sleeve down with her other hand. "I'm clumsy." The words came out practiced, smooth. She'd said them before. Hit it on a cabinet door. "Naomi, your wine, Mr. Reyes. I'll have Marcus bring it right away." She disappeared into the kitchen before he could say another word. Dominic sat back in his chair, his appetite completely vanished. Around him the restaurant continued its elegant theater, laughter from a nearby table, the clink of silverware against fine china, a string quartet playing something classical and forgettable. But all he could see was that bruise, that flash of purple-black that spoke of violence, of someone's hands where they had no right to be. He'd seen hundreds of bruises in his line of work. Thousands, probably. Violence was currency in his world, a tool applied with varying degrees of precision depending on the message being sent. He'd authorized his share of it, had even delivered it personally when circumstances required. But this was different. This wasn't business. This wasn't strategy. This was something that made his blood run cold and hot simultaneously, that activated instincts he'd thought he'd buried under years of calculated detachment. Someone had hurt her. Someone was still hurting her, if the careful way she'd hidden it was any indication. Marcus appeared with the wine, an older man with the bearing of someone who'd spent 40 years in high-end service. Mr. Reyes, the 2015, as requested. I have no idea what you're implying about my previous selections. Marcus, Dominic kept his voice level, casual. Naomi, how long has she been having accidents? The sommelier's professional smile dimmed. He glanced toward the kitchen, then back to Dominic, clearly weighing his loyalties. Mr. Reyes, I'm not sure. Marcus. Just his name, but weighted with everything that name meant. Not a threat, exactly. More a reminder of who was asking. Marcus set down the wine bottle with careful precision. 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, started small, claimed she'd tripped, burned herself on a pan. The bruises got worse. She's good at hiding them, but... He hesitated. You learn to see it in this business. The ones who are running from something. You know who? No, she doesn't talk about her personal life. Keeps to herself, does her work, leaves. But there's a man who picks her up sometimes. Black Mercedes, expensive suit. Looks like a prosecutor or a politician. That particular breed of asshole who thinks the world exists to serve them. Dominic's jaw tightened. License plate? Mr. Reyes, I'm not sure I should... Marcus. A different tone now, one that made the sommelier straighten unconsciously. License plate. Marcus pulled out his phone, swiped through photos until he found what he was looking for. I took this 2 weeks ago. Seemed like the kind of thing someone might need someday. The photo showed a black Mercedes S-Class idling in the loading zone outside Augusto's. Visible in the frame was a partial license plate, and through the driver's window, the profile of a man in his late 30s, sharp features, sandy hair, the kind of face that graced campaign posters and news segments. Dominic committed every detail to memory. Send that to me. Mr. Reyes, if this becomes a problem, it won't. He looked up at Marcus, and something in his expression made the older man step back. Not for you. After Marcus left, Dominic sat alone with his wine, untouched. Through the kitchen's swinging doors, he could occasionally glimpse Naomi moving between tables, that carefully constructed invisibility back in place. He thought about the bruise, about the practiced way she'd lied, about the man in the Mercedes who looked like he believed he was untouchable. In Dominic's experience, the people who believed they were untouchable were the ones who most needed to learn otherwise. Naomi Carter kept her hand steady as she delivered entrees to table 7, smiled appropriately at their jokes, refilled water glasses with mechanical precision. Inside, her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape the cage of her body. He noticed. Of all the people in this restaurant, senators, lobbyists, power brokers who could barely be bothered to look at the staff, Dominic Reyes had noticed, had seen what she'd spent months hiding, what she'd perfected the art of concealing beneath long sleeves and careful lies. She didn't know much about Dominic Reyes, not really. Restaurant gossip painted him as someone important, someone dangerous, someone you didn't ask questions about. He tipped well, treated the staff with distant courtesy, and occasionally men in expensive suits would join him for conversations that stopped the moment anyone came within earshot. But when he'd caught her wrist, gentle, too gentle for a man who radiated that much controlled power, she'd seen something in his eyes that terrified her more than Ethan's worst rages. Recognition, understanding, and beneath that, fury. Naomi, you okay? Christina, another server, touched her elbow. You look pale. I'm fine. The lie came automatically. Just tired. Girl, you're always tired lately. When's the last time you actually slept? Naomi forced a smile. I'll sleep when I'm dead. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Christina frowned, but didn't push, one of the things Naomi appreciated about her. In a world where everyone wanted to fix things they didn't understand, Christina had the wisdom to know when to let things lie. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to check it to know who it was. The anxiety that spiked through her nervous system was identification enough. Where are you? Ethan. Of course. She pulled out her phone, typed quickly with shaking fingers. At work. Off at 10. The response came immediately. I'll pick you up. We need to talk. 4 words that made her stomach drop. We need to talk in Ethan speak meant she'd done something wrong, failed to meet some invisible standard, disappointed him in ways she wouldn't understand until he explained them in excruciating detail, usually while his hands were around her throat. "Naomi?" Marcus appeared at her elbow. "Mr. Reyes asked if you could bring his check." Her heart stuttered. "Can't someone else?" "He asked for you specifically." Of course he did. She found the check, added it to the leather portfolio with hands that she willed to steadiness, and approached Dominic's table like she was walking toward a cliff edge. He was signing something on his phone, but he looked up the moment she arrived. Those dark eyes, intelligent, assessing, missing nothing, fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run. "Your check, Mr. Reyes." He didn't take it immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, setting it on the table between them. "I'm going to give you this," he said quietly. "You don't have to call. You don't have to do anything with it, but I want you to have it." Naomi stared at the card. Heavy stock, expensive. Just a name, Dominic Reyes, and a phone number. No company, no title, nothing else. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." He slid the card toward her. "When you're ready, if you're ready, that number reaches me directly, 24 hours a day." "Mr. Reyes, I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine." "Naomi." He said her name like it mattered, like she mattered. "I've been in this city a long time. I know what fine looks like. This isn't it." She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the fiction, the careful story she'd constructed about her life. But something about the way he looked at her, not with pity, not with judgment, but with a cold, calculating fury that wasn't directed at her, made the lies stick in her throat. "I can't," she whispered. "You can." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "When you're ready." He left cash, far more than the meal cost, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Naomi stood there, the business card burning in her palm like a live coal. Around her, the restaurant continued its performance of civilization, but all she could think about was the look in Dominic Reyes's eyes and the terrifying possibility that someone had finally seen her, really seen her, and wasn't going to look away. Dominic sat in the back of his town car, watching the city slide past the tinted windows. Beside him, his head of security, a former Marine named Torres who'd saved his life twice and asked for a job instead of gratitude, reviewed something on a tablet. "The plate Marcus sent," Dominic said. "Run it." Torres didn't ask questions. That was one of the reasons Dominic paid him extremely well. "Give me 20 minutes. It took 15. "Ethan Caldwell." Torres turned the tablet so Dominic could see. "Federal prosecutor, Eastern District. 38 years old, Georgetown Law, clerked for a federal judge before joining the U.S. Attorney's Office. Made his name prosecuting organized crime, currently leading a task force on public corruption." The irony wasn't lost on Dominic. Personal life? Not much public information, no wife, no kids on record. Keeps a low profile outside the courtroom. Torres swiped to another screen. "But here's what's interesting. I pulled his property records. He owns a townhouse in Georgetown, purchased 3 years ago, well above what his government salary should afford. Also has a lake house in Annapolis that's worth about $2 million. On a prosecutor's salary?" "Exactly." Dominic studied the photo on the screen. Ethan Caldwell at some legal conference, accepting an award for public service. That same face from Marcus's photo, but polished for cameras. The kind of man who looked like he'd dedicated his life to justice, who spoke eloquently about the rule of law and the importance of accountability. The kind of man who went home and put bruises on someone who trusted him. "Dig deeper," Dominic said. "Financials, associates, cases he's prosecuted. I want to know everything about him. Who he's protecting, who's protecting him, where his money actually comes from." "You thinking what I'm thinking? That a federal prosecutor crusading against corruption is probably dirty himself? It's D.C., Torres, everyone's dirty. It's just a question of how deep the stain goes." Torres nodded. "I'll have preliminary findings by tomorrow morning. Full workup within 72 hours. Make it 48. Boss, that's 48 hours. Dominic's voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It didn't need to. "And Torres, keep this quiet. No one outside our inner circle knows we're looking at him." "Understood." The car pulled up to Dominic's building, a pre-war structure in DuPont Circle that had been converted into luxury condos. His occupied the entire top floor, purchased through a shell corporation that was buried under 6 other shell corporations. Privacy was survival in his line of work. He rode the private elevator up, his mind turning over the problem of Ethan Caldwell like a puzzle with missing pieces. A federal prosecutor with unexplained wealth, a taste for violence, and the kind of protection that came with his position. Men like that believed they were untouchable, that their power insulated them from consequences. Dominic had made a career of teaching people that no one was untouchable. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for dinner. I'm sorry if I worried you. Everything is fine." Naomi. She must have gotten his number from the card. He typed back, "You don't have to apologize. The offer stands." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I can't, you can, when you're ready." No response. He didn't expect one. Dominic poured himself a drink, single malt, no ice, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Naomi Carter was probably getting into a Mercedes with a man who hurt her, going home to a place that should have been safe, but was anything but. And tomorrow, Ethan Caldwell would wake up and go to work, prosecuting criminals while being one himself, secure in the belief that his position protected him from justice. He had no idea that he'd just become the target of something far more dangerous than any legal investigation. Dominic Reyes had built an empire on patience, on strategy, on understanding that the most effective way to destroy an enemy wasn't brute force, it was turning their own power against them. And Ethan Caldwell had just made a very serious mistake. He'd hurt someone Dominic had decided to protect. Naomi sat in the passenger seat of Ethan's Mercedes, her hands folded in her lap. Every muscle in her body tensed for whatever was coming. The leather seat that had once felt luxurious now felt like a trap, the new car smell mixing with Ethan's expensive cologne in a combination that made her nauseous. "You're quiet tonight," Ethan said, his voice pleasant, almost friendly. That was the worst part. When he was friendly, it meant the explosion was building, pressure accumulating behind the dam of his civility. "Just tired. Long shift." He turned onto the street leading to his Georgetown townhouse. Not her apartment, she noticed. His place, where the neighbors were carefully deaf and the walls were thick enough to swallow screams. "I drove by earlier, saw you talking to someone." Her blood turned to ice. "Lots of people. It's a restaurant." This was different. Corner table. Expensive suit. "The 2 of you looked familiar." "He's a regular customer, Ethan. I bring him his check. That's it." "What did you talk about?" "Nothing. He thanked me for the service, left a tip." "You're lying." The shift was instant, pleasant to cold in the space between heartbeats. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles going white. "I'm not—" "Don't." The word cracked like a whip. "I can always tell when you're lying, Naomi. Your voice gets higher. You touch your neck. And right now you're doing both." She forced her hands down, tried to keep her voice level. "He just asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine." "Why would he ask that?" "Because you left marks," she wanted to scream. "Because you put your hands on me and normal people can see it, can see what you've done." "I don't know. Maybe I look tired." Ethan pulled into his driveway, killed the engine. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring straight ahead. "Who is he?" "I told you, just a customer." "His name, Naomi? What's his name?" Her mind raced. Lie or truth? Which one would hurt less? "Reyes, I think." That's what his credit card said. She watched Ethan's profile, saw the name register, saw something flicker behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe concern, quickly buried. Dominic Reyes? "I don't know his first name." "Why does it matter?" Ethan turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her shrink back against the door. "Because Dominic Reyes is a criminal, Naomi. A very dangerous criminal, and if he's taken an interest in you, that's a problem." "He hasn't taken an interest. He asked if I was okay. I said yes. That's it." "Then why do you have his card?" Her breath stopped. "How did he—" Ethan reached over, fast as a striking snake, and grabbed her purse from her lap. He dumped the contents onto his lap, pawing through them until he found what he was looking for. The business card. Heavy stock, simple print. 24 hours a day, Ethan read from the back, where Dominic had written in pen. His voice dropped to something dangerous. What the fuck is this? Nothing. What is this? She flinched, hating herself for it. He was just being nice. Nice. Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dominic Reyes doesn't do nice, Naomi. He doesn't hand out his personal number because he's concerned about a waitress having a bad day. He's a predator. He sees weakness and he exploits it. Like you. The words were out before she could stop them. The silence that followed was absolute, deadly. What did you say? Naomi's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Nothing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Ethan grabbed her jaw, fingers digging into her cheeks, forcing her to look at him. Say it again, come on. If you're going to be brave, be brave. Ethan, please. Everything I do is for your own good. His grip tightened, thumb pressing into her cheekbone hard enough to bruise. You think the world out there is kind? You think someone like Dominic Reyes wants to help you? He's using you, probably trying to get to me through you. Why would he? Because I prosecute men like him. Because taking you away from me, corrupting you, would be exactly the kind of power play he'd enjoy. Ethan leaned closer, his breath hot on her face. Is that what you want? To be some gangster's whore? No. Then you stay away from him. You don't talk to him. You don't take his calls. You throw away that fucking card. Understood? When she didn't answer fast enough, his grip tightened until she gasped. Understood? Yes. Tears burned her eyes. Yes, I understand. He released her abruptly, and she fell back against the door, hand going to her throbbing jaw. Ethan picked up the business card, stared at it for a long moment, then carefully tore it into pieces and let them flutter to the floor. Inside, he said. Now. Naomi gathered her scattered belongings with shaking hands, stuffing them back into her purse. As she followed Ethan toward the house, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. Dominic, she realized. He must have gotten her number from the restaurant's employee database. If you need help, just send me your location. Nothing else. I'll come. She deleted it before Ethan could see, but the words burned themselves into her memory. I'll come. Like it was that simple, like she could just send a text and be saved. But nothing was that simple. Not when Ethan could destroy her life with a phone call, not when he had connections throughout the justice system, not when everyone believed he was the good guy. She followed him inside, and the door closed behind her with the finality of a cell lock. Tomorrow, she would go back to work. She would hide the new bruises, would perfect new lies, would smile and serve and pretend everything was fine. Because that's what she'd been doing for 2 years, and she'd gotten very, very good at it. 3 days later, Dominic sat in his office reviewing the file Torres had compiled on Ethan Caldwell. It was extensive, detailed, and absolutely damning. The federal prosecutor who'd built his career on fighting corruption was dirty in ways that would have been almost impressive if they weren't so thoroughly disgusting. Shell companies, offshore accounts, money laundering through real estate transactions. He'd been taking bribes for years, from defense attorneys, from criminals looking to avoid prosecution, from anyone willing to pay for the kind of protection his position could offer. But it was the personal information that made Dominic's blood run cold. 3 women in the past 5 years. All roughly the same profile. Young, isolated, financially vulnerable. All had filed police reports for domestic violence, then mysteriously withdrawn them. All had disappeared from their previous lives with remarkable thoroughness. One was dead, officially ruled a suicide, but the investigating officer's notes suggested significant doubt. The other 2 had simply vanished. New names, new cities, running from something, running from him. We could leak this to the press, Torres suggested. Financial crimes, corruption, abuse. It's enough to destroy him. No, Dominic set down the file. Not yet. Boss, with all respect, every day we wait is another day he... I know. Dominic's voice was sharp. But if we move now, we tip our hand. He's a federal prosecutor with connections throughout the justice system. He'll know where the leak came from. and he'll use every resource at his disposal to bury it. And us. So what's the play? Dominic was quiet for a moment, thinking. We build a case, not the kind you take to court, the kind you leak piece by piece. Start with anonymous tips to the FBI's public corruption unit, his financial irregularities, the offshore accounts. Let them start an investigation. That'll take months. Yes, but it'll be official. And once the FBI is involved, once there's an active investigation, anything he does to retaliate becomes evidence of obstruction. Dominic leaned back. In the meantime, we protect Naomi. Quietly. She doesn't know. He doesn't know. But if he touches her again, we intervene. We eliminate the problem. Torres nodded slowly. You know this isn't how we usually operate. We don't play long games for personal reasons. This isn't personal. Torres raised an eyebrow. Boss, with all respect, bullshit. You've met the woman 3 times, had one conversation, and you're willing to start a war with a federal prosecutor. That's the definition of personal. Dominic didn't argue because Torres was right. This was personal. Deeply, irrationally personal in a way that made no strategic sense. But when he closed his eyes, he saw that bruise, heard the carefully practiced lie, recognized the fear in her eyes that came from months or years of being hurt by someone who was supposed to protect her. And he'd decided, with the same cold certainty he applied to every business decision, that it was going to stop. Get me surveillance on Caldwell, he said. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, and assign someone to watch Naomi. Discreetly. If he makes a move, we'll know. After Torres left, Dominic stood at his window again, looking out at the city that had made him rich and powerful and profoundly alone. Somewhere out there, Naomi Carter was probably at work, serving tables, hiding bruises, surviving. He thought about texting her again, offering help. But he knew she wouldn't take it. Not yet. Fear was a powerful cage, and Ethan had locked it thoroughly. So he would wait, build his case, gather evidence. And when the time was right, when Ethan Caldwell's carefully constructed world of power and protection showed its first crack, Dominic would bring the whole structure down on his head. It wasn't justice, not in any legal sense, but it was the only kind of justice Dominic knew how to deliver. And it was absolutely inevitable. The surveillance reports came in daily, delivered by Torres in manila folders that grew thicker with each passing week. Dominic read them in his office, the contents painting a picture of Ethan Caldwell's life that was both mundane and monstrous. Morning coffee at the same cafe in Georgetown. Lunch meetings with defense attorneys whose clients had mysteriously avoided prosecution. Evening visits to Naomi's apartment, stays that lasted anywhere from 1 hour to the entire night. And twice a week, like clockwork, expensive dinners at restaurants where the wine cost more than Naomi probably made in a month. The perfect life of a successful prosecutor. Except for the parts Torres's team photographed through telephoto lenses, Ethan's hand gripping Naomi's arm hard enough to leave marks, the way she flinched when he raised his voice, the careful way she moved the morning after he'd spent the night. The FBI took the bait, Torres reported on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks into the surveillance. They've opened a preliminary investigation into Caldwell's finances. Nothing official yet, but agents have started making calls. He know? Not yet, but he will soon. Men like him always have sources inside the bureau. Dominic nodded, already thinking 3 moves ahead. When he finds out, he'll get paranoid. Start covering his tracks, maybe moving money. That's when people make mistakes. And if he takes it out on her? The question hung in the air between them. Dominic had asked himself the same thing every night for 3 weeks, weighing strategy against conscience, patience against the very real possibility that his plan might get Naomi killed. We have someone watching her apartment? 24/7. Marcus at the restaurant is keeping tabs during her shifts. If Caldwell makes a move that looks like it's escalating, we intervene immediately. Intervene. I don't care about the investigation. I don't care about the long game. She comes first. Torres studied him with an expression that was part curiosity, part concern. Boss, you've never met her. Not really. One conversation at a restaurant. Why does she matter this much? Dominic didn't have a good answer, or maybe he did, and he just didn't want to say it out loud. That he'd seen too much violence in his life, caused too much of it himself, and somewhere along the way he'd decided that if he couldn't be a good man, He could at least protect one good person from a bad one. Just keep watching, he said instead. That night, Dominic found himself at Augusto's again. He told himself it was coincidence, that he needed to meet with a city councilman about a construction contract anyway, so why not do it over good food? But the truth was harder to ignore. He wanted to see her, needed to confirm with his own eyes that she was still okay, still surviving. She appeared at his table with the same careful invisibility, the same practiced smile. "Mr. Reyes, your usual table." "Naomi." He studied her face, cataloging changes. New makeup, heavier than before, covering something, probably. "How have you been?" "Fine, thank you. Can I start you with—" "You deleted my text." She froze, water pitcher in hand. "I don't know what you're talking about." 3 weeks ago. I sent you a message. You deleted it immediately." Color rose in her cheeks. "Mr. Reyes, I'm working—" "I know." He kept his voice low, aware of the other diners. "And I'm not trying to make trouble for you, but I need you to know that the offer still stands. If you need help—" "I don't." The words came out sharp, defensive, then softer. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. Everything is fine." "Naomi, please." Her eyes met his, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. He saw fear there, and something worse, resignation. The look of someone who'd stopped believing rescue was possible. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." She left before he could respond, disappearing into the kitchen with the same practiced efficiency. Dominic sat alone with his menu, the words blurring on the page. His phone buzzed. A text from Torres. Caldwell just got a call from someone at Justice. Looked upset. Heading to his car now. Then, 2 minutes later, he's driving toward Naomi's apartment. Fast. Dominic's blood turned to ice. He threw cash on the table and headed for the exit, dialing Torres as he moved. "Where is she?" "Still at the restaurant. She's got another hour on her shift." "Get someone to her, now. I don't care if she notices. I don't care if it blows our cover. If he shows up at that restaurant looking for her, already on it. Martinez is 2 blocks away." Dominic reached his car, his driver already pulling up to the curb. "Take me to Augusto's. Fast." The drive took 8 minutes that felt like hours. Dominic watched the city blur past, his mind racing through scenarios. If Caldwell had found out about the FBI investigation, if he suspected Naomi had talked to someone, if his paranoia and rage combined in the wrong way. They pulled up just as a black Mercedes screeched to a stop in front of the restaurant. Ethan Caldwell got out, his face flushed with anger, and headed straight for the entrance. Dominic was moving before his driver had fully stopped, crossing the sidewalk in long strides. "Caldwell." The prosecutor turned and recognition flashed across his face, then suspicion. "Reyes, this is a surprise." "Is it?" Dominic positioned himself between Ethan and the restaurant entrance. "You looked like you were in a hurry." "I'm meeting someone. Not that it's your business." "Naomi?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Stay away from her." "Or what?" "Or I'll have you arrested." "Harassment? Stalking? I'm sure I can find something that sticks." Dominic smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You could try, but then we'd have to go through discovery, and I imagine there are things about your life you'd rather not have examined in open court." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you think you know. I know a lot of things, Caldwell. For instance, I know the FBI is looking into some irregularities in your financial records. Offshore accounts, shell companies, the kind of thing that raises questions about a federal prosecutor's commitment to the law he's supposed to uphold." Ethan went very still. "You're behind that." "Me? I'm just a businessman. But if I were investigating a corrupt prosecutor, I'd start with his money, follow it back through the real estate transactions, the consulting fees, the bribes disguised as legitimate income." Dominic stepped closer, dropping his voice. "And if I really wanted to destroy him, I'd look at his personal life. The women who filed police reports and then mysteriously withdrew them. The one who died. The 2 who ran." The color drained from Ethan's face. "You're making a very serious mistake." "Am I?" Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who's made mistakes. Plural. And now they're catching up with you. Touch her and I'll... Touch her? Dominic's voice dropped to something dangerous. I'm not the one who's been touching her, Caldwell. I'm not the one leaving bruises. I'm not the one she's afraid of. For a moment, Ethan looked like he might swing. His hands clenched into fists, his whole body tensing for violence. But they were on a public street in front of a restaurant full of witnesses, and he was just smart enough to know that throwing a punch at Dominic Reyes would be career suicide. Stay away from her, Ethan said again, but his voice had lost its authority. She's mine. She's not property. You don't know anything about her, about us, about what we have. I know she's afraid of you. I know she hides bruises. I know she lies about being clumsy because the truth is too dangerous to speak out loud. Dominic leaned in until they were almost nose to nose. And I know that's going to stop, one way or another. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The restaurant door opened behind them, and Naomi stepped out, pulling on her coat. She froze when she saw them, her eyes going wide. Ethan, what are you doing here? Ethan's whole demeanor shifted. The rage melted into something that might have looked like concern to someone who didn't know better. I tried to call. You didn't answer. I was working. My phone's in my locker. I was worried. He moved toward her, and Dominic saw her tense, preparing for whatever came next. Can we talk? In the car? I'm not. She glanced at Dominic, then back to Ethan. I have plans. Cancel them. Ethan, I said cancel them. The mask slipped just enough to show what was underneath. We need to talk. Now. Dominic stepped forward. The lady said she has plans. This doesn't concern you, Reyes. I'm making it concern me. Naomi looked between them, panic rising in her eyes. Please, both of you, just... I'll go with Ethan. It's fine. Naomi, you don't have to... I want to. She said it too quickly, the lie transparent. Really, it's fine. Dominic wanted to argue, wanted to physically prevent her from getting in that car, but he could see the calculation in her eyes. If she refused, if she embarrassed Ethan in front of Dominic, she'd pay for it later. Better to comply now, to minimize the damage. It was the same calculation abuse victims made every day, the same survival math that kept them trapped. Call me if you need anything, Dominic said quietly. Anything at all. Ethan grabbed her arm, not hard enough to be obvious, but possessive, and steered her toward the Mercedes. She won't be needing anything from you. Dominic watched them drive away, every instinct screaming at him to follow, to intervene, to end this now. But Torres appeared at his elbow, a restraining presence. We can't move yet, Torres said quietly, not without evidence that would hold up. He's going to hurt her, maybe. But if we grab him now, if we make this a kidnapping or a confrontation, we're the criminals. He's a federal prosecutor, boss. We need to be smarter than this. Dominic knew Torres was right, knew that patience was the play, that strategy would win where violence would only create problems. But knowing it didn't make it easier to watch Naomi disappear into the night with a man who'd already hurt her, and would almost certainly hurt her again. I want surveillance on his townhouse, Dominic said. Audio if you can get it, video at minimum. And if things escalate, if we hear anything that sounds like she's in immediate danger, we move. Consequences be damned. Understood. Alone in his car, Dominic made a decision. The long game was necessary, the careful dismantling of Ethan Caldwell's life and career the smart play. But he needed insurance, a backup plan for when, not if, things went wrong. He pulled out his phone and made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to in 2 years, a former FBI agent named Sarah Chen who'd left the bureau after discovering too much corruption, too many protected criminals, too many cases buried by politics. She answered on the third ring. Dominic Reyes, I thought you'd forgotten I existed. I need a favor. Of course you do. Nobody calls me because they miss my sparkling personality. There's a federal prosecutor named Ethan Caldwell, Eastern District. I need everything you can find on him that wouldn't be in official records. The stuff the FBI doesn't want to know about. There was a pause. Caldwell. I've heard whispers. Nothing concrete, but the kind of whispers that make people uncomfortable. Why the interest? He's hurting someone. And you care because... Good question. Because I can stop it. Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You know what I love about you, Dominic? Most criminals at least pretend to be motivated by money or power. You're upfront about your vigilante complex. Can you help or not? Give me a week, maybe less. But Dominic, if he's as dirty as the whispers suggest, he's got protection at high levels. Going after him means going after everyone who's invested in keeping him clean. I'm aware. And you don't care. No. After he hung up, Dominic stared out at the city lights, thinking about Naomi in Ethan's car, probably being interrogated about her conversation with Dominic, about why she'd been outside at the exact moment Ethan arrived, about 1,000 tiny perceived betrayals that would justify whatever he did next. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm okay. Please don't worry. Naomi. Trying to protect him, probably, or protect herself by making him think intervention wasn't necessary. He typed back, if you need help, send me your location. Just the location. I'll understand. No response. The next 3 days were agony. Surveillance reports showed Naomi going to work, coming home, maintaining her routine with robotic precision. But Torres's team noted changes. She moved more carefully, wore more makeup, kept her sleeves pulled down even in the kitchen's heat. New bruises, then. Hidden carefully, but there. On the 4th day, Sarah called. I found something. You're going to want to hear this in person. They met at a coffee shop in Adams Morgan, far from Dominic's usual haunts. Sarah looked exactly as he remembered, early 40s, Asian American, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent 20 years reading lies for a living. She slid a folder across the table. Ethan Caldwell. On paper, he's clean, graduated top of his class, stellar prosecution record, rising star at justice. But scratch the surface and it gets interesting. How interesting? 3 dead-end internal investigations into prosecutorial misconduct, all buried. 2 complaints from defense attorneys about evidence tampering. Not proven, but smoke without fire is rare. And here's the really fun part. His mentor, the judge he clerked for? Federal Judge Richard Morrison, currently under investigation himself for accepting bribes. Dominic flipped through the folder. Morrison's protecting him. Was protecting him. Morrison's too busy trying to save his own ass right now, which means Caldwell's umbrella just got a lot smaller. Sarah leaned forward. There's more. I talked to a paralegal who used to work in his office. She wouldn't go on record, but off the record? She said Caldwell had a temper, especially with women. Made passes at female staff, retaliated when they refused. Nothing ever stuck because Morrison made the complaints disappear. The women who filed domestic violence reports, I found 2 of them. One's in Seattle now, new name, won't talk. The other is in therapy trying to rebuild her life. She wouldn't give me details, but she said if someone was trying to stop Caldwell, she'd testify. Not about specifics, too traumatized, but about the pattern, about who he is. Dominic felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. The one who died. Suicide. Officially. Sarah's expression darkened. Jessica Martinez, 26, found in her bathtub with her wrist slit. Medical examiner ruled it suicide, but the responding officer noted defensive wounds that weren't explained. Case was closed within 48 hours, no investigation. Let me guess, Morrison made a call. Can't prove it, but the timeline matches. Jessica died 3 weeks after filing a police report against Caldwell. Report was withdrawn the day before she died. Then she's dead, case closed, everyone moves on. Dominic's hands tightened on the folder. You think he killed her? I think she's dead and he's not, and the circumstances are suspicious enough that in a fair world, there would have been a real investigation. But we don't live in a fair world. Sarah finished her coffee. What are you planning to do with this? End him, legally or however necessary. She studied him for a long moment. There's a woman, the one he's hurting now. That's what this is about. It wasn't a question, but Dominic answered anyway. Yes. You know her? Not well, but well enough to start a war with a federal prosecutor. Yes. Sarah shook her head. You're either the most noble criminal I've ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both. She stood, gathering her things. The FBI investigation into his finances is gaining traction. Give it another month, maybe 6 weeks, and they'll have enough for an indictment. But Dominic, men like Caldwell don't go quietly. When he realizes the walls are closing in, he'll either run or lash out. Make sure your friend isn't in the blast radius when that happens. After Sarah left, Dominic sat alone with the folder, reading through evidence of a pattern that had been going on for years. Ethan Caldwell had been hurting women with impunity, protected by his position and his mentor, secure in the knowledge that the system he was supposed to serve would protect him instead. But that system was crumbling. Morrison's protection was gone. The FBI was circling, and Dominic had evidence that, leaked to the right journalists at the right time, would destroy whatever remained of Caldwell's reputation. The question was timing. Move too soon, and Caldwell would have time to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, use his remaining connections to bury everything. Move too late, and Naomi might not survive the wait. His phone rang. Torres. "Boss, we have a problem." Dominic's blood went cold. "Naomi?" "Caldwell just got served with a grand jury subpoena, financial crimes investigation. He's on the phone with his lawyer now, and from what our audio's picking up, he's panicking." "Where is she?" "At work, but Caldwell just canceled his afternoon meetings. My guess is he's going to go somewhere to think, to plan. Men like him, when they're cornered, they become unpredictable. Put extra security on her. I want someone with eyes on her every second until we know what he's planning." "Already done. Martinez is in the restaurant pretending to be a customer. Chen's outside watching the exits." Dominic stood, already heading for his car. "I'm going to the restaurant." "Boss, is that smart? If Caldwell sees you there again, I don't care. I'm not letting her out of our sight." He made it to Augusto's in 15 minutes, taking his usual table. Naomi appeared almost immediately, and he could see the surprise in her eyes. "Mr. Reyes," twice in 1 week. "I had a craving." He kept his voice light, casual. "How are you, Naomi?" "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Up close, he could see the strain around her eyes, the careful way she held herself. "The usual?" "Actually, I was hoping we could talk. When you have a moment." She glanced around nervously. "I'm working. Please. It's important." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because she nodded. "Give me 10 minutes. I'll take my break." She disappeared into the kitchen, and Dominic waited, aware of Martinez 3 tables over, of Chen outside, of the net of protection they'd woven around Naomi without her knowledge. When she returned, she slid into the seat across from him, her movements quick and nervous. "What is this about?" "Ethan Caldwell got served with a grand jury subpoena today. Financial crimes." The color drained from her face. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know things. Naomi, when he finds out you've been talking to me, when his paranoia and his rage combine, I haven't been talking to you. I've barely said 2 words to you." He won't see it that way. Men like him, when their world starts to collapse, they look for someone to blame, someone to control. And you're the only person in his life he has any power over. Her hands were shaking. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're in danger, real danger, and I can help you, but you have to let me." "Help me how? By making it worse? By giving him more reasons to—" She stopped, biting off the words. "To what, Naomi? To hurt you? He's already doing that." "You don't understand." Tears welled in her eyes. "You can't just swoop in and fix this. He's a federal prosecutor. He has connections, power, resources. If I try to leave, if I try to get help, he'll find me. He'll destroy me. Or he'll just kill me, like he—" She stopped again, hand flying to her mouth. "Like he killed Jessica Martinez?" Dominic said quietly. Naomi's eyes went wide with shock. "How do you know about Jessica?" "I know a lot of things. I know she filed a police report, just like others before her. I know she withdrew it. I know she died 3 weeks later, and the case was closed suspiciously fast." "She was my friend." Naomi's voice broke. "We worked together at a different restaurant before I came here. She introduced me to Ethan at a charity event. She tried to warn me, tried to tell me what he was really like, but I didn't listen. And then she was dead, and everyone said it was suicide, but I knew. I knew he'd done something." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "And tell them what?" That I suspected a federal prosecutor of murder with no evidence? That my friend who'd filed a complaint against him just happened to die? They'd have laughed at me. Or worse, they'd have told him, and then I'd be next. Dominic reached across the table, covered her shaking hands with his. I can protect you. I have resources, safe places he can't reach. But you have to trust me. I can't. The words came out as a sob. I can't just leave my life, my job, everything. Where would I go? What would I do? And even if I ran, even if I hid, he'd find me. He always finds them. Not if he's in prison. She looked up at him through tears. He's a federal prosecutor. They don't go to prison. They get reprimands, suspensions, maybe lose their jobs. But prison? Men like him don't go to prison. They do when the evidence is overwhelming. When the FBI builds a case they can't ignore. When victims testify. When the protection they relied on disappears. Dominic squeezed her hands gently. I'm building that case, Naomi, but it takes time. And in the meantime, I need you to stay safe. Why? She searched his face. Why do you care? You don't even know me. It was the same question Torres had asked, the same question he'd been asking himself. And finally, sitting across from this broken, terrified woman who was trying so hard to be brave, he had an answer. Because someone should. Because I've spent my entire life in a world where power means getting away with hurting people, and I'm tired of it. Because when I saw those bruises, I decided that if I couldn't be a good man, I could at least do this one good thing. Naomi stared at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if I can be saved. You don't have to be saved. You just have to survive long enough for him to fall. She pulled her hands away, wiping at her tears. I need to get back to work. If I'm gone too long, someone will tell him, and he'll ask questions I don't know how to answer. Naomi, thank you for caring, really, but I can't. I'm not ready. I'm sorry. She stood and hurried back toward the kitchen, leaving Dominic alone at the table with the weight of her fear and his own growing certainty that time was running out. His phone buzzed. Torres, Caldwell's lawyer just left. He looked bad. My guess is the news isn't good. Then 2 minutes later, Caldwell just got in his car, heading toward the restaurant. Dominic was on his feet immediately. He caught Marcus's eye, gestured him over. Get Naomi. Now. Tell her she needs to leave through the back. Don't ask questions. Just do it. Marcus must have seen something in his expression because he didn't argue, just disappeared into the kitchen. Dominic headed for the front entrance, positioning himself between the door and the dining room. Ethan's Mercedes pulled up outside. He got out, his face flushed, his movements jerky with barely controlled rage. When he entered the restaurant and saw Dominic standing there, something cold and dangerous flashed across his features. You, Ethan said. You did this. I don't know what you're talking about. The FBI, the subpoena. You've been feeding them information. Have I? That's a serious accusation. Where is she? Who? Don't fuck with me, Reyes. Ethan moved closer, and Dominic could smell alcohol on his breath. Day drinking. A bad sign. Where's Naomi? Not here. Bullshit. I can track her phone. She's here. Then maybe she doesn't want to see you. Ethan's hand went to his waistband, and for a heart-stopping moment, Dominic thought he was going for a gun. But he just stood there, trembling with rage, trying to maintain control in a public space. This isn't over, Ethan said. No, it's just beginning. After Ethan left, Dominic found Naomi in the back alley, Marcus standing protective guard. She looked small, fragile, utterly terrified. He knows, she whispered. He knows something's wrong, and he's going to blame me. You're not going home tonight, Dominic said. It wasn't a question. I have a safe place. Somewhere he can't reach you. He'll find me. He won't. I promise you, Naomi. He won't. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then finally, she nodded. It was the smallest gesture, the tiniest surrender. But it was enough. The safe house was a converted townhouse in Arlington, purchased years ago through so many shell corporations that even forensic accountants would have trouble tracing it back to Dominic. 3 stories, reinforced doors, security cameras on every approach, and neighbors who'd been carefully selected for their complete lack of curiosity about other people's business. Naomi sat on the edge of the guest room bed, still wearing her server's uniform, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She hadn't spoken during the drive over, hadn't asked questions when Torres swept her for tracking devices and confiscated her phone. She'd just followed instructions with the mechanical compliance of someone who'd stopped expecting good outcomes. "You'll be safe here," Dominic said from the doorway. He'd given her space, hadn't entered the room, respecting the boundaries that trauma had built. "There are clean clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom. If you need anything." "Why are you doing this?" Her voice was small, lost. "You could have just walked away, forgotten about me. But you started a war instead." "It's not a war. It's justice. Justice." She laughed, but the sound was hollow. "I stopped believing in justice when Jessica died and nobody cared. When I went to the police after Ethan first hit me, and the officer told me I should try couples counseling, when I realized that men like him don't face consequences because the system protects them." Dominic stepped into the room just far enough to sit in the armchair near the window, close enough to talk, far enough to not be threatening. "The system protects them until it doesn't, until the evidence becomes too overwhelming to ignore, until their protectors abandon them to save themselves. Ethan's mentor, Judge Morrison, is facing his own indictment. That protection is gone. And the FBI doesn't care about politics when there's clear evidence of financial crimes. But the other things, the violence, the abuse, what he did to Jessica, that's harder to prove, isn't it?" She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Money leaves trails. Bodies can be explained away. Bruises fade, and women who accuse powerful men get destroyed even when they're telling the truth. Not always. Often enough." She stood pacing to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. "You know what the worst part is? I used to be strong. I had plans, dreams. I was going to law school, wanted to be a civil rights attorney. Then I met Ethan at that charity event, and he was charming and successful and interested in me. Me, this waitress with student loans and big dreams but no connections. He targeted you. I know that now. I know he saw someone vulnerable, someone he could isolate and control. But back then I thought I was lucky." Her reflection in the window looked haunted. "He paid off my student loans, helped me find a better apartment, introduced me to important people. And slowly, so slowly I didn't notice until it was too late, he took over my entire life." "When did it start?" "The violence. 6 months in. I disagreed with him about something stupid. What movie to watch, maybe. He grabbed my wrist, squeezed hard enough to bruise. Then he apologized, said he was stressed about a case, bought me expensive jewelry. I told myself it was a one-time thing." She turned from the window, tears streaming down her face. "But it wasn't. It never is with men like him. It got worse, more frequent. And every time I thought about leaving, he'd remind me how much he'd done for me, how much I owed him, how no one would believe me if I accused him." "He was right about one thing," Dominic said quietly. "People wouldn't have believed you. Not without evidence, not against a federal prosecutor. But that's changing. Because you're making it change. Because he got sloppy. Because Morrison's protection disappeared. Because the FBI follows money, and Ethan's money tells a very clear story about a corrupt prosecutor taking bribes." Dominic leaned forward. "But you're right that the personal crimes are harder to prosecute. That's why I need you to tell me everything. Every incident, every threat, every time he hurt you. I need dates, details, anything that can establish a pattern." "For what? So you can leak it to the press and I can be destroyed in the court of public opinion? So I can become the woman who accused Ethan Caldwell, have my entire life picked apart by his lawyers and the media? No. So when the time comes, when he's already falling, when the FBI has him on corruption charges and his credibility is shattered, you can testify about who he really is. So the other women he hurt can testify. So Jessica's death can be reinvestigated with the scrutiny it deserved the first time." Naomi wiped at her tears with shaking hands. "You're talking about burying him. I'm talking about justice. Real justice. Not the kind that gets buried by powerful men protecting their own. And if I say no, if I just want to disappear, start over somewhere he can't find me, then I help you do that. New identity, new city, enough money to start fresh. Whatever you need. Dominic's voice was steady, certain. But Naomi, running means he wins. It means he keeps his position, keeps his power, keeps hurting people. And eventually there will be another woman sitting where you're sitting, making the same impossible choice. She sank back onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being afraid, of hiding, of pretending everything is fine when I'm dying inside. But I don't know if I have the strength to fight him. You don't have to fight him alone. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I have resources, protection, people who can keep you safe while we build the case. Sarah Chen, the investigator I hired, found 2 other women willing to testify about Ethan's pattern of abuse. They won't be alone. You won't be alone. Who are you? Naomi looked up at him, searching his face. Really? Everyone says you're a criminal, that you run half the illegal operations in this city. But you're trying to help me. Why? It was a fair question, one he'd been avoiding answering honestly even to himself. I'm not a good man, Naomi. I've done things, authorized things, that would horrify you if you knew the details. I've built an empire on exploiting weaknesses, on operating in the spaces where law and order break down. But somewhere along the way, I got tired of watching powerful men hurt vulnerable people and face no consequences. So when I can, when it doesn't conflict with my business, I try to even the scales. A criminal with a conscience. More like a criminal who's tired of watching other criminals win. She studied him for a long moment. Okay. I'll tell you everything. I'll testify if it comes to that, but I need your promise. If this goes wrong, if he comes after me, he won't get to you. You have my word. Over the next 2 hours, Naomi talked. She told him about the first time Ethan hit her, about the escalating pattern of violence and control, about Jessica's warnings and her suspicious death, about the police officer who'd dismissed her complaint with a suggestion to try couples counseling. She gave dates, details, showed him photographs she'd hidden in a cloud account that Ethan didn't know existed. Bruises, split lips, fingerprints on her throat. Dominic recorded everything, his expression growing colder with each revelation. By the time she finished, the sun had set and the room was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the curtains. I need to make some calls, he said. There's food in the kitchen, clean clothes in the closet. Torres will be outside if you need anything. Dominic? She stopped him at the door. Thank you for seeing me, for caring when nobody else did. He wanted to tell her that plenty of people should have cared, that the system should have protected her, that everything that had happened to her was a failure of justice on multiple levels. But instead, he just nodded and left her alone with her trauma and her fragile hope that maybe, finally, someone was going to make things right. Downstairs, he found Torres in the security room, monitoring the camera feeds. Anything? Caldwell's been calling her phone non-stop. 37 calls in the last 3 hours. Also sent about 50 texts ranging from apologetic to threatening. Torres pulled up the messages on screen. He knows she's not coming home. Dominic read through them, his jaw tightening with each one. The messages started with concern. Where are you? I'm worried. Please call me. And quickly devolved into accusations and threats. You're making a mistake. Whatever Reyes told you is a lie. If you don't come home right now, there will be consequences. I made you, Naomi. I can destroy you. He's unraveling, Dominic observed. Question is, how does he unravel? Some men fall apart quietly. Others take everyone down with them. Caldwell strikes me as the second type. Dominic pulled out his phone. I'm calling Sarah. We need to accelerate the timeline. Sarah answered on the first ring. Tell me you didn't do something stupid. Define stupid. Dominic, she's safe. That's what matters. But Caldwell knows she's gone and he's spiraling. We need to move on him now, before he does something desperate. The FBI investigation isn't ready. They need another 3 weeks minimum to present to the grand jury. Then we don't wait for the FBI. We leak what we have to the press. Financial crimes, pattern of abuse, Jessica Martinez's suspicious death. We destroy his credibility so thoroughly that when the FBI does move, public pressure forces a real prosecution. Sarah was quiet for a moment. That's a risky play. If the evidence isn't airtight, if his lawyers can poke holes in the story, it could backfire. Make him look like a victim of a smear campaign. The evidence is airtight. I have testimony from 3 women, financial records that clearly show corruption, and enough circumstantial evidence around Jessica's death to demand a reinvestigation. Dominic's voice was cold, calculated. And I have something else. Naomi kept photos of her injuries, documented dates and incidents, stored them in a cloud account as insurance. She'll need to go public, put her face to the story. I know, and she's agreed if it comes to that. Dominic, you understand what you're asking her to do? The press will tear her apart. Defense attorneys will question everything. Why she stayed, why she didn't report it earlier, whether she's lying for attention or money. They'll find every mistake she's ever made and use it to discredit her. Which is why we don't lead with her story. We lead with the financial crime, something concrete, provable, that establishes Caldwell as corrupt. Then we layer in the pattern of abuse, the other women, Jessica's death. By the time Naomi's story comes out, his credibility will already be shattered. You've thought this through. I've thought about nothing else for weeks. Sarah sighed. Okay, I have a contact at the Washington Post, investigative journalist who specializes in corruption stories. She's careful, thorough, won't print anything she can't verify. Give me 24 hours to make the introduction. Make it 12. Dominic, 12 hours, Sarah. Caldwell is unstable and getting worse. I don't know what he's planning, but I'm not giving him time to execute it. After he hung up, Dominic stood at the window looking out at the quiet street. Somewhere across the river, Ethan Caldwell was probably tearing apart Naomi's apartment, looking for clues about where she'd gone. Or maybe he was drowning his rage in expensive scotch, planning his next move. Either way, the man was dangerous, and Dominic had just escalated from surveillance to open warfare. His phone rang. Unknown number. Reyes! Ethan's voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested barely restrained violence. I know you have her. Do you? Don't play games with me. She disappeared right after talking to you. Her phone's off, she's not at her apartment, and you just happen to be nowhere to be found. It doesn't take a prosecutor to connect those dots. Maybe she just got tired of you hitting her. I never... Ethan stopped, recalibrated. Whatever she told you, it's a lie. She's unstable, dramatic. Probably told you I abused her, right? It's what she does when she doesn't get her way. Funny, that's almost exactly what you told people about Jessica Martinez before she died. The silence on the other end was absolute. When Ethan spoke again, his voice had dropped to something deadly. You're making a very serious mistake. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're a corrupt federal prosecutor with a pattern of violence against women, and your protection just evaporated. The FBI's investigating you, your mentor's going to prison, and now the woman you've been terrorizing is somewhere you can't reach her, ready to tell her story to anyone who'll listen. No one will believe her. I'm a federal prosecutor. She's a waitress with no credibility. Was a federal prosecutor. By the time we're done, you won't have a job, a reputation, or your freedom. You'll have a prison cell in the rest of your life to think about Jessica Martinez and every other woman you hurt. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The same one I made to Naomi. You're done hurting people. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Neither do you. Dominic's voice was ice. I've ended men more powerful than you, Caldwell. Men with armies, political connections, protection at the highest levels. You're just a mid-level prosecutor with delusions of invincibility. And you just made the mistake of hurting someone under my protection. She was never yours to protect. She's not anyone's. That's the point you keep missing. She's not property. She's a person who deserves to live without fear, and you stole that from her. But I'm giving it back. Ethan laughed, and the sound was unhinged. You think you're the hero in this story? You're a criminal, Reyes. Everything you touch turns dirty. And when this is over, when the truth comes out, everyone will see that you manipulated a vulnerable woman to get to me. That this was all just some power play in your world of corruption. Maybe, but you'll still be in prison, and she'll still be free. I can live with that trade. He hung up before Ethan could respond. Torres looked at him with concern. That was a dangerous call to take. He would have kept trying. Better to let him rage now when we're prepared than let him stew and plan. You think he'll come after her directly? I think he's narcissistic enough to believe he can fix this. Convince her to come back or intimidate her into silence or... Dominic stopped, a cold realization settling over him. He's going to try to kill her. You sure about that? Think about it. The FBI is investigating him, his protection's gone, and now the woman who can testify about his violence is in the wind. If she's dead, if it looks like suicide, just like Jessica, it's one less witness, one less problem, and he's already gotten away with it once. Torres was already moving, pulling up security feeds, checking weapons. I'll double the guards. No one gets within 100 yards of this house. Not good enough. He's a federal prosecutor. He knows people, cops, federal agents, criminals he's worked with. He could hire someone, could pull strings to find out where we are. So what do you want to do? Dominic thought for a moment. We move her. Tonight. Somewhere even I don't know about until after she's there. You choose the location, you arrange the transport, you tell me after it's done. That way if Caldwell tries to get information from me, you can't give him what you don't know. Smart. Torres was already making calls, coordinating with his team. Give me 2 hours. Dominic went back upstairs and knocked softly on Naomi's door. She opened it, and he could see she'd been crying again. We need to move you, he said without preamble. Somewhere safer, somewhere he can't possibly find. Torres will arrange everything. He called you, didn't he, Ethan? Yes. What did he say? That he wants you back. That I'm making a mistake. The usual threats from a man who's losing control. He's going to kill me. It wasn't a question. Just like he killed Jessica. He'll make it look like suicide or an accident, and everyone will believe him because that's what they want to believe. He's not going to get the chance. You can't watch me forever. Eventually I'll have to go back to my life, and when I do, there won't be an eventually. By the time you surface again, he'll be in federal custody. I promise you that. She searched his face, looking for certainty, for hope. I want to believe you. Then believe me. I haven't failed yet, and I'm not starting with you. 2 hours later, Torres returned with 3 SUVs, all with tinted windows and different license plates. We're doing a shell game. She'll be in one vehicle, decoys in the other 2, all heading in different directions. Final destination is a cabin in West Virginia, off the grid, no cell service. Closest neighbor is 5 miles away. My most trusted guys will rotate security in 8-hour shifts. Naomi came downstairs with a small bag of belongings. She looked terrified but determined. How long will I be there? As long as it takes, Dominic said. Days, maybe a week, just until we've neutralized the threat. You mean until you've destroyed him? Same thing. She stepped closer to him, and for a moment he thought she might break down again, but instead she squared her shoulders and met his eyes. Make him pay. For Jessica, for the others, for everyone he's hurt. Make him pay for all of it. I will. She got into the middle SUV, and Dominic watched all 3 vehicles pull away in different directions, a choreographed dance designed to confuse anyone watching. Then he turned to Torres. Now we go on offense. The next morning, Sarah called with good news. Rachel Kim at the Post is interested, very interested. She wants to meet with you and review the evidence. They met at a coffee shop in Georgetown, far from Dominic's usual territory. Rachel Kim was in her mid-30s, Korean-American, with the sharp eyes and tired expression of someone who'd spent years uncovering stories that powerful people wanted buried. Sarah says you have evidence of corruption and abuse involving a federal prosecutor, she said without preamble. I'm listening. Dominic slid the folder across the table. Ethan Caldwell, Eastern District. On the surface, he's a crusader against corruption. Scratch that surface, and you'll find bribery, money laundering, prosecutorial misconduct, and a pattern of violence against women that includes at least one probable murder. Rachel flipped through the documents, her expression growing more focused with each page. These financial records, how did you obtain them? Does it matter? If they were obtained illegally, I can't use them. Judge would suppress them, and it would taint the whole story. They were obtained by a private investigator through legal means. Bank records, property filings, shell corporation registrations, all public information if you know where to look. And the women willing to testify? 3 confirmed, possibly more once the story breaks. One is currently in protective custody because we have credible reason to believe Caldwell will try to kill her, just like he killed Jessica Martinez. Rachel looked up sharply. You're accusing him of murder. Well, I'm saying a woman filed a domestic violence complaint against him, withdrew it under pressure, and died 3 weeks later in a bathtub with defensive wounds the medical examiner couldn't explain. I'm saying the case was closed within 48 hours with no real investigation. And I'm saying Ethan Caldwell's mentor, Judge Morrison, made a lot of problems disappear for him over the years, problems that are now coming back because Morrison's facing his own indictment. This is explosive, if even half of it's true. All of it's true. And I have evidence for every claim, but I need you to publish fast before Caldwell has time to destroy evidence or silence witnesses. Rachel's journalistic instincts were clearly at war with her caution. I need to verify everything. Talk to the women. Review the financial records with experts. Get comment from Caldwell and the U.S. Attorney's Office. That takes time. How much time? A week? Maybe 2. You have 72 hours. That's not realistic. It has to be. Every day we wait is another day he's free to hurt people, to destroy evidence, to use his position to bury this. I'm giving you the biggest corruption story of the year, Rachel, but only if you move fast. She stared at him for a long moment. Why? What's your angle here? Sarah says you're connected, that you operate in gray areas. Why risk exposing yourself to take down a federal prosecutor? Because he hurt someone I care about, and because I can. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Rachel gathered up the folder. I'll need to talk to the victims. All of them. I can arrange that. But they're scared, traumatized. If you push too hard, I've interviewed abuse survivors before. I know how to handle it. She stood, and something in her expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, if this is all true, you're doing the right thing. Men like Caldwell hide behind their positions and destroy lives. Someone needs to stop them. Then stop him. Fast. Over the next 48 hours, Rachel worked with the intensity of someone who'd found a story worth risking her career for. She interviewed the 2 women Sarah had found, reviewed financial records with forensic accountants, talked to former colleagues of Caldwell's who confirmed his temper and inappropriate behavior with female staff. She even found the responding officer from Jessica Martinez's death, retired now, bitter about cases that had been shut down from above, who went on record saying he'd had doubts about the suicide ruling but was told to close the case. Dominic monitored it all from a distance, getting updates from Sarah, making sure the women felt safe enough to talk, coordinating with Torres to ensure Naomi remained hidden and protected. On the 3rd day, Rachel called. I'm publishing tomorrow morning. Front page above the fold. Federal prosecutor facing corruption allegations and accusations of abuse. I couldn't get him to comment. His lawyer sent a statement calling it a politically motivated smear campaign, but I have enough corroboration that the story stands on its own. The FBI investigation? I confirmed it's active and that Caldwell received a grand jury subpoena. That's in the story too. And Jessica Martinez? I'm calling it a suspicious death that deserves reinvestigation. I can't accuse him of murder without more evidence, but I lay out the timeline, the defensive wounds, the rushed closure. Let readers draw their own conclusions. When does it go live? 6 a.m. tomorrow, online and in print. Dominic felt something cold and satisfied settle in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm a journalist. This is my job. But there was satisfaction in her voice, too. Though between you and me, I hope they nail him to the wall. That evening, Dominic sat in his office preparing for what would come next. The story would break, Caldwell's world would explode, and the man would either collapse under the weight or lash out in desperation. Either way, tomorrow everything would change. His phone buzzed, a text from Torres. Movement at Caldwell's townhouse. He just loaded 2 suitcases into his car. Think he's running. Dominic's blood ran cold. If Ethan ran now, if he disappeared before the story broke and the FBI moved, he could vanish into the kind of life where money and connections could hide someone indefinitely. And from that hiding place, he could spend years hunting Naomi, hunting the other women, eliminating everyone who'd testified against him. He couldn't allow that. Dominic typed back, "Stop him, whatever it takes." He doesn't leave the city. The response came immediately. How permanent are we talking? Dominic stared at the question, weighing justice against expedience, law against survival. He could order Ethan killed right now, problem solved, threat eliminated. It would be cleaner, simpler, more certain than trusting the system to actually deliver justice. But Naomi had asked him to make Ethan pay. Not to make him disappear, but to make him face consequences. Real consequences, public consequences, the kind that couldn't be hidden or explained away. Not permanent, Dominic typed. Just make sure he doesn't leave, and call the FBI. Anonymous tip that their subject is fleeing. 20 minutes later, Torres called. FBI just showed up at his house, told him not to leave the jurisdiction. He's back inside and he looks pissed. Good, let him be pissed. Tomorrow morning he's going to be finished. Dominic poured himself a drink and waited for dawn, for the moment when Rachel Kim's story would hit the internet and destroy everything Ethan Caldwell had built. Somewhere in a cabin in West Virginia, Naomi was probably awake too, unable to sleep, waiting for the same sunrise. Tomorrow, the war began in earnest, and Dominic had every intention of winning. The story broke at exactly 6 a.m., and within an hour, Dominic's phone was flooded with news alerts. The Washington Post headline was stark and damning. Federal prosecutor faces corruption probe, abuse allegations amid pattern of violence against women. Rachel Kim had delivered everything he'd hoped for and more. The article methodically laid out Ethan Caldwell's financial irregularities, the offshore accounts that couldn't be explained by a government salary, the shell companies that traced back to known criminals he'd failed to prosecute. But it was the second half of the story that would destroy him. 3 women, named and quoted, describing a pattern of violence, manipulation, and terror. Jessica Martinez's suspicious death. The police reports that vanished. The medical examiner's notes about defensive wounds that were never investigated. By 7 a.m., every major news outlet in the country had picked up the story. By 8, a crowd of reporters had gathered outside Ethan's Georgetown townhouse. By 9, the U.S. Attorney's Office released a terse statement announcing that Ethan Caldwell had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of multiple investigations. Dominic watched it all unfold from his office, Torres beside him monitoring news feeds and social media. The response was exactly what he'd anticipated: shock, outrage, demands for immediate action. Survivors of domestic violence were sharing the story. Legal experts were calling for Ethan's disbarment, and politicians who'd once praised him were now scrambling to distance themselves. "It's working," Torres said. "His credibility's destroyed." Even his lawyer's statement sounds desperate, calling it a coordinated attack by criminals seeking revenge for his successful prosecutions. "He's going to blame me publicly soon. Try to make this about gang warfare instead of his crimes. Let him. No one's going to believe that you orchestrated 3 women's testimonies spanning 5 years just to take down one prosecutor." Dominic's phone rang. Sarah Chen. "Have you seen the news?" Her voice was tight with something between satisfaction and concern. "I'm watching it now." "It's bigger than I expected. DOJ just announced they're opening their own internal investigation. FBI is accelerating their case. And get this, 2 more women have come forward since the story broke. Colleagues from the U.S. Attorney's Office saying he harassed them, retaliated when they refused his advances. The dam's breaking." "Yeah, but Dominic, there's something else. I just got a call from a source inside the FBI. They're looking at you too, trying to figure out how you got all this information, whether you obtained it illegally, whether this is witness tampering or obstruction. Let them look. Everything I gave Rachel was obtained legally, and I haven't tampered with anyone, just provided protection to women who were afraid to come forward. They're going to come after you anyway. You're a known criminal taking down a federal prosecutor. They have to at least look like they're investigating whether this was legitimate or some kind of underworld power play. I can handle the FBI. Can you? Because if they decide to make an example of you, if they flip this into a story about organized crime interfering with the justice system, Sarah, I appreciate the concern, but I knew the risks when I started this. I'm not backing down now." After he hung up, Dominic stood at his window, watching the city below. Somewhere in that sprawl of power and politics, Ethan Caldwell was probably watching the same news coverage, seeing his life disintegrate in real time. The question was how he would respond, with surrender or with violence. The answer came at 2 p.m. Torres burst into Dominic's office, his expression grim. "We have a problem. The FBI just raided Caldwell's townhouse. They're saying he's gone. Gone where? No one knows. Neighbor said he left around 11 this morning, right after his lawyer showed up. FBI thought he was just going to his office to cooperate with the investigation, but he never showed. Phone's off, car's missing, and his lawyer claims he has no idea where he went. Dominic's blood turned to ice. He's going after Naomi. He doesn't know where she is. We've been careful. He's a federal prosecutor, Torres. He has resources, connections, people who owe him favors. If he's desperate enough, if he's willing to burn every bridge. Dominic was already moving, grabbing his coat. Call the team at the cabin. Tell them to go to high alert, no one in or out, and get me a location on Caldwell's car. Already working on it. I've got our people checking traffic cameras, ALPR systems. Not good enough. He knows we'll be looking. He'll ditch the car, use a burner phone, stay off the grid. Dominic's mind raced through scenarios. What about credit cards, bank accounts? Nothing since this morning. He withdrew $10,000 in cash from an ATM at 9 a.m. That's the last ping. $10,000, enough to disappear for a while, or enough to hire someone to do his dirty work. Dominic pulled out his phone and called the lead security officer at the cabin, a former Delta Force operator named Marcus Chen, who'd saved his life in a firefight 3 years ago. Marcus, we have a situation. Ethan Caldwell's in the wind, and we have reason to believe he might be coming for Naomi. Understood. We're already locked down. Motion sensors on all approaches, guards rotating every 2 hours, and we moved her to the basement safe room just in case. How's she doing? Scared, but holding it together. She saw the news coverage this morning, cried for about an hour, then asked if she could help somehow. But tell her she's helping by staying alive. And Marcus, if Caldwell shows up, if anyone shows up who even looks suspicious, I know the drill, boss. They don't get within 100 yards. After hanging up, Dominic turned to Torres. I want every asset we have looking for him, every informant, every cop on our payroll, everyone. And I want to know who he's been talking to, other prosecutors, defense attorneys, criminals he's worked with. Someone knows where he is or what he's planning. The next 6 hours were an exercise in controlled chaos. Dominic's network spread across the city like a web, looking for any trace of Ethan Caldwell. Torres coordinated with contacts in law enforcement, fed them anonymous tips about places Caldwell might go, people he might reach out to. Sarah worked her FBI sources, trying to get ahead of their manhunt. But Ethan had vanished. At 8 p.m., Rachel Kim called. I just got a message. Someone claiming to be Caldwell wants to talk to me. Says he'll give me his side of the story, prove that you orchestrated all of this to destroy him. Don't meet with him. I'm a journalist, Dominic. If a subject of my story wants to respond, he's not looking to respond. He's looking for leverage, information he can use to find Naomi or to figure out who else is helping build the case against him. If you meet with him, you become part of his game. You think he'd hurt me? I think he's desperate, cornered, and capable of anything. Don't underestimate what a man like that will do when he's got nothing left to lose. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Where do I meet him? Excuse me? If I don't show up, he'll know something's wrong. But if I go with protection, if your people are watching, maybe we can catch him, end this before anyone else gets hurt. Dominic wanted to say no, wanted to keep civilians out of what was rapidly becoming a dangerous situation. But Rachel had a point. If Ethan thought he could control the narrative, if he believed he could intimidate or charm a journalist into seeing things his way, he might get careless. Where and when? He said 10 p.m. at the Lincoln Memorial. Public place, lots of tourists, nowhere to hide. Which is exactly why he chose it. Hard for us to set up surveillance without being obvious. Dominic thought for a moment. Okay, you go, but you're wired for sound, and we'll have people positioned throughout the memorial. You talk to him, let him say whatever he wants to say, and you leave the moment things feel wrong. Understood? I've done this before, Dominic. Not with someone like Caldwell. He's not a corrupt politician looking to spin a story. He's a man who's killed before and is probably planning to kill again. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. Torres assembled a team, 8 people strategically positioned around the Lincoln Memorial, all connected by earpieces, all armed. Dominic himself took a position near the reflecting pool, close enough to see the memorial steps, but far enough to not be immediately obvious. Rachel arrived at exactly 10 p.m., wearing a jacket with a microphone hidden in the lapel. She climbed the steps slowly, looking around for Ethan. He appeared from behind one of the columns, and even from a distance, Dominic could see how much the man had deteriorated in less than 24 hours. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes wild with the kind of manic energy that came from fear and rage and sleep deprivation. "Ms. Kim." His voice came through clearly on the wire. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Caldwell, you said you wanted to tell your side of the story." "My side?" He laughed bitterly. "My side is that I've dedicated my life to fighting corruption, and now I'm being destroyed by the most corrupt man in this city because I got too close to his operations." Dominic Reyes. "Yes. Everything in your article, the financial irregularities, the abuse allegations, all of it, it's a fabrication. Evidence planted by his people, women paid or intimidated into lying. 3 women independently gave detailed accounts of your violence. Are you saying they're all lying?" "I'm saying they're either mistaken or coerced. Reyes has resources, connections. He could have convinced them, bribed them, threatened them into saying whatever he wanted." Rachel's voice remained professional, journalistic. "What about Jessica Martinez, the woman who died after filing a complaint against you?" Ethan's expression cracked, just for a moment. "Jessica was troubled, depressed. Her death was a tragedy, but it had nothing to do with me." The medical examiner noted defensive wounds, which were explained at the time. She'd been in a minor altercation days before. Everything was investigated and ruled a suicide, but by investigators who were influenced by Judge Morrison, who's now facing his own corruption charges. "Morrison is a good man who's being railroaded by the same forces coming after me." Ethan stepped closer to Rachel, and Dominic tensed, ready to move. "You're a good journalist. I've read your work. You care about the truth. So ask yourself, why would Dominic Reyes suddenly care about domestic violence? Why would a known criminal invest so much time and resources into destroying one prosecutor unless that prosecutor was a threat to his empire? Are you saying you were investigating him?" "I'm saying I was looking into irregularities involving city contracts, construction projects that were clearly fronts for money laundering. And the moment I started asking questions, this happened." Rachel tilted her head. "If that's true, why not go to the FBI? Why run?" "Because the FBI is already compromised. Reyes has people everywhere, cops, agents, politicians. If I'd stayed, if I'd let them arrest me, I'd end up dead in a cell and it would be called suicide, just like Jessica." "That's a serious allegation." "It's the truth." Ethan's voice rose, drawing looks from tourists nearby. "And you can help me prove it. If you investigate Reyes the way you investigated me, if you dig into his operations with the same scrutiny, I investigated you because multiple sources independently confirmed a pattern of corruption and abuse. If you have evidence against Reyes, present it. Otherwise, you're just asking me to help you deflect from your own crimes. Crimes I didn't commit. Mr. Caldwell, I spoke to 3 women who showed me photographs of injuries you caused. I reviewed financial records that show offshore accounts you can't explain. I talked to the officer who responded to Jessica Martinez's death and had his investigation shut down from above. That's not deflection, that's evidence." Ethan grabbed her arm, and immediately every member of Dominic's team tensed. "You don't understand. You think you're exposing corruption, but you're just a tool. Reyes used you to destroy me, and when he's done, when I'm in prison or dead, he'll move on to his next target. And maybe that target will be you." Rachel pulled her arm free. "Are you threatening me? I'm warning you, Dominic Reyes doesn't do favors out of kindness. He protects people because they're useful to him. And the moment you stop being useful, this interview is over." Rachel turned to leave. "Wait." Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. "Where is she? Where's Naomi?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. Reyes has her hidden somewhere, probably fed her lies about me, convinced her to testify. If I could just talk to her, if I could explain what? How the bruises were her fault? How she drove you to violence? How she should come back so you can finish what you started?" Rachel's journalistic distance had evaporated, replaced by disgust. "I've covered enough domestic violence cases to recognize the pattern, Mr. Caldwell. And your textbook." She walked away, descending the memorial steps quickly. Ethan stood there for a moment, his whole body shaking with rage. Then he pulled out a phone and made a call. "He's calling someone," Torres said through the earpiece. "Can you get closer?" Dominic moved carefully, using tourists as cover. He couldn't hear the whole conversation, but he caught fragments. "She has to be somewhere. Cabin, maybe, or a safe house. I need you to check the property records. West Virginia, Maryland, Virginia. I'll make it worth your while." So Ethan was hiring someone to find Naomi, someone with access to property records, someone who could search databases and track down possible safe houses. "Torres, we need to know who he's calling." "Working on it. Signal's encrypted, but I'm running it through. Got it. The number belongs to a private investigator named Derek Walsh, former cop, works mostly for defense attorneys. Can we get to him?" "Already on it." Dominic watched Ethan end the call and disappear into the crowd, moving with the desperate energy of a man running out of options. He signaled his team to follow at a distance to track where Ethan went next. 20 minutes later, Torres called. "Caldwell just checked into a motel in Silver Spring under a fake name, paid cash. He's holed up in room 237. "And Walsh?" "Our people picked him up leaving his office. He's currently having a very persuasive conversation about why helping Ethan Caldwell would be bad for his health and his business license." "Will he talk?" "He already did. Caldwell hired him to find any property owned by shell corporations linked to me. Gave him a list of areas to focus on. West Virginia, Western Maryland, rural Virginia. Walsh was planning to start the search tomorrow morning." Dominic felt cold certainty settle over him. Caldwell's not going to wait. He's going to use whatever information Walsh finds and go after Naomi himself. "So we stop Walsh from finding anything?" "No, we feed him false information, a location that looks legitimate but leads Caldwell into a trap." Torres was quiet for a moment. "Boss, that's using her as bait." "No, that's using the idea of her as bait. The real Naomi stays exactly where she is, safe and protected. But we create a decoy location, something that looks like a safe house, and we let Walsh discover it. When Caldwell shows up, we're waiting for him." "Exactly." Within hours, Torres had constructed the perfect trap. An old hunting cabin in Western Maryland, owned by a shell company that could be traced back to Dominic with enough effort. Security cameras visible but not too obvious, a single car parked outside with Virginia plates, enough signs of occupation to be convincing. And inside, instead of Naomi, 6 of Dominic's best people armed and waiting. At dawn, Walsh called Caldwell with the discovery. The cabin's location, property records showing ownership through a Dominic-linked shell company, even surveillance photos showing what looked like guards rotating shifts. "He took the bait," Torres reported. Walsh said Caldwell sounded almost manic, demanded the exact address, GPS coordinates, everything. "How long until he gets there?" 2 hours, maybe 3 if he's being careful. Dominic wanted to be there, wanted to see Ethan's face when he realized he'd walked into a trap. But his presence would complicate things legally. Harder to explain why a known criminal was present at the arrest of a federal prosecutor. Better to let Torres' team handle it, to keep his hands clean. "Full surveillance," he told Torres. "Audio, video, everything recorded. I want ironclad evidence of him breaking into the property with intent to harm whoever he thought was inside." "What if he brings backup? Other criminals? Corrupt cops?" "Then we adapt. But I don't think he will. This feels personal to him. He's not going to share the satisfaction of hurting Naomi with anyone else." At 9 a.m., Torres called from the hunting cabin. "He's here. Just pulled up in a stolen Honda Civic. He's sitting in the car watching the house." Dominic put the call on speaker so he could hear everything. Through the phone, he could pick up the ambient sounds, wind in the trees, the distant call of birds, the tense breathing of men waiting for violence. "He's getting out," Torres whispered. "Moving toward the house. He's got a gun." Dominic's jaw tightened. So Ethan had come armed, prepared to kill. Any lingering doubt about his intentions evaporated. "He's at the door, trying the handle. It's locked, but he just kicked it in, moving inside." Dominic heard a crash through the phone, then Ethan's voice, loud and unhinged. "Naomi, I know you're here. We need to talk." Silence. Footsteps on wooden floors. "This is because of him, isn't it? Reyes. He's convinced you to betray me, to destroy everything we built together. But I can forgive you, baby, if you just come out, if we can talk. The sound of doors being thrown open, furniture being overturned. Stop hiding from me. I made you. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By spreading lies? By letting a criminal use you to destroy my career? More crashing. Then Ethan's voice dropped to something darker, more dangerous. If I can't have you, if you're going to choose him over me, then no one gets you. You understand? If I'm going down, if my life is over, you're coming with me. Now, Torres said quietly. The team moved with professional precision. Dominic heard it all through the phone, shouted commands, Ethan's scream of rage and surprise, the clatter of his gun hitting the floor, the sounds of him being restrained. Federal prosecutor my ass, one of Torres's men said. Came in here ready to commit murder. Call the FBI, Torres said. Tell them we have Ethan Caldwell in custody, armed and dangerous, breaking and entering with clear intent to harm, and make sure every second of this is documented. 2 hours later, FBI agents arrived at the cabin. They found Ethan in restraints, ranting about conspiracies and setups, demanding his lawyer. They found his gun, loaded, safety off, ready to fire. They found evidence that he'd stolen the car he arrived in. And they found video footage of everything from the moment he pulled up to the moment he was restrained, including his explicit threats to kill Naomi. The special agent in charge took one look at the evidence and made a call. Within 20 minutes, Ethan Caldwell was officially arrested on charges of breaking and entering, illegal possession of a firearm, attempted murder, and violating the conditions of his release. He would never see freedom again. Dominic watched the news coverage that evening from his office. Every network was running the story. Disgraced prosecutor arrested after breaking into cabin with intent to kill. The video of his arrest, of him screaming about Naomi and making explicit death threats, played on loop. Legal experts were calling it the final nail in his coffin, proof that the abuse allegations were true and that his violence had escalated to attempted murder. Sarah called with an update. DOJ just announced they're pursuing additional charges. Financial crimes, obstruction of justice, and they're reopening Jessica Martinez's death as a homicide investigation. Morrison flipped, gave up everything about how he protected Caldwell in exchange for a reduced sentence. And the FBI investigation into me? Closed. They concluded that while your methods were unconventional, nothing you did was illegal. You provided protection to vulnerable witnesses and helped expose corruption. Some agents are even saying you did their job for them. Dominic allowed himself a small smile. Justice prevails. Don't get cocky. You're still on their radar. But for now, you're the criminal who helped take down a corrupt prosecutor. That buys you some goodwill. After hanging up, Dominic drove to the cabin in West Virginia where Naomi had been staying. She met him on the porch, and for the first time since he'd met her, she didn't look afraid. It's over, she said. It wasn't a question. It's over. He's in federal custody, facing charges that will keep him in prison for the rest of his life. You're safe. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. I saw the video. Heard what he said about killing me. If your people hadn't been there, but they were. And you're alive, and he's going to pay for everything he did to you, to Jessica, to all the others. She threw her arms around him, and Dominic held her while she cried. Not tears of fear this time, but of relief, of release, of a burden finally lifted. What happens now? She asked when she pulled back. Now you rebuild. Get your life back. Figure out who you are when you're not afraid anymore. And you? I go back to my world. The one where I'm still a criminal, still operating in shadows. You saved my life. You destroyed a man who thought he was untouchable. That doesn't sound like a criminal to me. I'm not a hero, Naomi. I've done things, ordered things that would horrify you. This was just one good thing in a life full of bad ones. She studied his face. Maybe, but it was a very good thing, and I'll never forget it. As Dominic drove back to the city that night, he thought about justice and redemption, about whether one good act could balance a lifetime of sins. He didn't have an answer, but he knew that somewhere in Washington, a federal prosecutor who'd hurt women with impunity was sitting in a cell, finally facing consequences. And that would have to be enough. 3 weeks after Ethan Caldwell's arrest, Naomi stood in the corridor outside a federal courtroom, her hands trembling despite the warmth of the building. Through the small window in the courtroom door, she could see him sitting at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his once immaculate appearance reduced to stubble and hollow eyes. The man who'd terrorized her for 2 years looked small now, diminished, stripped of the power and polish that had made him untouchable. "You don't have to do this," Dominic said quietly beside her. He'd insisted on being here, had cleared his schedule despite Torres's warnings that his presence would draw attention. "You've already given your deposition. The prosecutors have everything they need." "I need to do this." Naomi's voice was steadier than she felt. "I need to look at him and know that I'm not afraid anymore." The preliminary hearing was procedural, a formality before the grand jury would hand down indictments on multiple charges. But the prosecutors had asked if Naomi wanted to be present, to see the process begin. She'd said yes before she could talk herself out of it. Sarah Chen appeared at the end of the hallway, walking quickly. "They're about to start. Naomi, the U.S. attorney, wants to know if you're comfortable sitting in the gallery. Caldwell's lawyer might try to intimidate you, stare you down, make you uncomfortable." "Let him try." Naomi squared her shoulders. "I survived 2 years of Ethan's abuse. I can handle his lawyer's dirty looks." Inside the courtroom, she took a seat in the second row directly in Ethan's line of sight if he chose to turn around. Dominic sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Sarah sat on her other side, a buffer against the handful of reporters who'd been allowed in. Judge Catherine Morrison, no relation to Ethan's disgraced mentor, entered, and everyone rose. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and the expression of someone who'd seen every courtroom trick and wasn't impressed by any of them. "Be seated. We're here for the preliminary hearing in United States versus Ethan James Caldwell." She looked over her reading glasses at the defense table. "Mr. Caldwell, you're represented by counsel?" Ethan's lawyer stood. A man named Richard Vance, who specialized in defending white-collar criminals and had a reputation for aggressive tactics. "Yes, Your Honor. Richard Vance for the defendant." "Very well. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ramirez, you may proceed." Jennifer Ramirez was young, barely 30, but she'd earned a reputation as a prosecutor who didn't back down from difficult cases. She stood and began methodically laying out the charges: corruption, bribery, money laundering, obstruction of justice, attempted murder, and in a development that had broken just days ago, second-degree murder in the death of Jessica Martinez. The medical examiner had reopened Jessica's case, this time without pressure from Judge Morrison to close it quickly. A forensic pathologist reviewed the original autopsy photos and concluded that the defensive wounds were inconsistent with suicide, that the position of the body suggested she'd been held underwater, that this was homicide staged to look like suicide. Combined with testimony from Jessica's friends about Ethan's escalating violence in the weeks before her death, the evidence was damning. "Your Honor," Ramirez continued, "the government has evidence of a pattern of violence spanning 5 years. 3 victims willing to testify, photographic evidence of injuries, medical records, and testimony from law enforcement officers whose investigations were shut down by judicial interference. The defendant used his position as a federal prosecutor to avoid accountability, to intimidate victims, and ultimately to commit murder when one victim refused to be silenced." Vance shot to his feet. "Objection. Ms. Ramirez is making closing arguments at a preliminary hearing. These are unproven allegations." "Which is why we're having a trial, Mr. Vance." Judge Morrison's voice was dry. "Save your objections for when they matter. Ms. Ramirez, do you have evidence to present?" "Yes, Your Honor. The government would like to enter into evidence financial records showing offshore accounts totaling $3.2 million, all funded by bribes from criminals the defendant failed to prosecute. We have recorded phone calls between the defendant and known felons discussing payment for dismissed charges. We have testimony from Judge Richard Morrison, who has admitted to helping the defendant cover up multiple allegations of misconduct in exchange for favorable rulings in certain cases." The hearing continued for 2 hours, each piece of evidence more damning than the last. Naomi watched Ethan's expression change from defiant to desperate as the scope of the case against him became clear. This wasn't a he-said-she-said domestic dispute that could be explained away. This was a systematic pattern of corruption and violence, documented and corroborated by multiple sources. When Ramirez finally mentioned Naomi by name, Ethan turned in his seat, his eyes finding her in the gallery. For a moment, she saw the old rage flash across his face, the look he'd worn right before he'd hit her, before he'd wrapped his hands around her throat and told her she belonged to him. But this time, instead of flinching, Naomi met his gaze steadily. She didn't look away, didn't cower. She just stared back at him until he was the one who turned away, diminished and broken. Ms. Carter has provided extensive testimony about the defendant's violence, Ramirez said. Photographs of injuries, dates and times of assaults, threats made against her life. She has also testified that the defendant explicitly told her he'd killed Jessica Martinez and would kill her too if she ever tried to leave. That's a lie. Ethan jumped to his feet, his lawyer grabbing his arm. She's lying. Reyes paid her to lie, coached her, threatened her. Mr. Caldwell, sit down. Judge Morrison's voice cracked like a whip. One more outburst and you'll be removed from this courtroom. Vance pulled Ethan back into his seat, whispering urgently. Ethan was shaking, his facade of control completely shattered. Your Honor, Vance said when he'd gotten his client under control, the defense maintains that Mr. Caldwell is the victim of a sophisticated frame orchestrated by Dominic Reyes, a known criminal with extensive resources and motivation to destroy a prosecutor who was investigating his operations. Judge Morrison looked up sharply. Is Mr. Reyes present in this courtroom? Dominic stood. I am, Your Honor. Are you here in some official capacity? No, Your Honor. I'm here supporting Ms. Carter, who's a friend. I see. Mr. Vance, do you have evidence that Mr. Reyes orchestrated this alleged frame? We're still investigating, Your Honor, but then you'll present that evidence at trial if it exists. But let me be clear, Counselor. I've reviewed the government's case, and the evidence against your client is substantial and came from multiple independent sources. Unless you can prove that Mr. Reyes somehow manufactured offshore bank accounts, bribed witnesses across 5 years, and convinced a medical examiner to falsify autopsy findings, your conspiracy theory is just that, a theory. Vance sat down, his strategy deflated. The hearing concluded with Judge Morrison denying bail. Mr. Caldwell, you're charged with murder and attempted murder. You've already demonstrated a willingness to flee and a clear danger to witnesses. You'll remain in federal custody until trial. As the marshals led Ethan out of the courtroom, he looked back at Naomi one more time. But the rage was gone now, replaced by something that looked like incomprehension, as if he couldn't understand how the world had turned against him so completely. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Naomi had prepared a statement with Ramirez's help, something brief that wouldn't compromise the trial, but would let other survivors know they weren't alone. My name is Naomi Carter, she read from a prepared card, her voice carrying across the courthouse steps. For 2 years, I was in an abusive relationship with Ethan Caldwell. He used his position as a prosecutor to make me believe I had no recourse, no way to escape. He hurt me, threatened me, and made me watch as he destroyed other women who tried to get away. When my friend Jessica Martinez tried to leave him, she ended up dead. I stayed silent because I was afraid of becoming the next victim. She paused, looking up at the cameras. But I'm not silent anymore. Ethan Caldwell is not a public servant. He's not a crusader for justice. He's a violent predator who used his power to avoid accountability for years. And if you're someone he hurt, if you're someone who's been too afraid to come forward, it's not too late. The truth is finally being heard. The questions came rapid fire after that, but Dominic's security team formed a protective barrier, guiding Naomi to a waiting car. Inside, she collapsed against the seat, adrenaline draining out of her system. You did good, Dominic said. I almost threw up on the courthouse steps. But you didn't. You stood there and told your truth, and millions of people heard it. Sarah turned from the front seat. The U.S. Attorney's Office just released a statement. They're opening a tip line for anyone else who might have been victimized by Caldwell. They're also reviewing every case he prosecuted in the last decade for potential misconduct. How long until trial? Naomi asked. 6 months, maybe 8. But Naomi, with the evidence they have, with Morrison's testimony and the forensics on Jessica's case, this isn't going to trial. Vance is going to push for a plea deal. Will they take it? Depends on what he offers. But even if they do, Caldwell's looking at life in prison. Murder, attempted murder, corruption. Those charges don't come with light sentences. Over the next 3 months, the case against Ethan Caldwell expanded like a cancer diagnosis, each new investigation revealing another metastasis of corruption. Prosecutors found evidence that he'd taken bribes from defense attorneys, had sexual relationships with vulnerable defendants in exchange for reduced charges, had used his position to settle personal vendettas against people who'd crossed him. 2 more women came forward with abuse allegations. A paralegal from the U.S. Attorney's office filed a sexual harassment complaint describing years of inappropriate behavior. A defendant Ethan had prosecuted claimed he'd been framed, that evidence had been planted, and a review of the case file revealed troubling inconsistencies that supported the claim. The man who'd once been praised as a rising star in the Justice Department was now the subject of a comprehensive investigation into prosecutorial misconduct that threatened to overturn dozens of convictions. Through it all, Naomi rebuilt her life piece by piece. She moved into a new apartment, one Ethan had never been to, that held no memories of violence. She started therapy with a specialist in trauma recovery. She reconnected with friends she had lost touch with during the isolation of her relationship with Ethan, and she started law school. "You're sure about this?" Dominic asked when she told him. They were having coffee at a cafe in Georgetown, one of their regular meetings that had evolved from protection detail to genuine friendship. "Law school's brutal. 3 years of stress and competition." "I'm sure. I wanted to be a civil rights attorney before I met Ethan. He made me give up that dream, told me I wasn't smart enough, that I should be grateful he was taking care of me." Naomi stirred her coffee, thoughtful. "I'm taking it back. All of it. The dreams he killed, the person I was before he broke me down." "You're not broken." "No, but I was bent pretty badly. Law school is how I straighten back out." Dominic smiled. "When you graduate, if you need a job—" "Absolutely not. I'm going into prosecution. Domestic violence cases specifically. I'm going to be the person I needed when I was trapped." The irony of a criminal offering a future prosecutor a job isn't lost on me. The irony of a criminal being the only person who helped me isn't lost on me either. She reached across the table, squeezed his hand. "You saved my life, Dominic. I don't know how to repay that." "You already are, by living it, by not letting him win." 4 months after the preliminary hearing, Richard Vance approached the U.S. Attorney's Office with a plea deal. Ethan would plead guilty to second-degree murder in Jessica Martinez's death, attempted murder of Naomi Carter, and multiple corruption charges. In exchange, the government would drop some of the lesser charges and recommend concurrent sentencing. Jennifer Ramirez called Naomi before responding. "It's your decision. We can reject the plea and go to trial, but trials are unpredictable. He could get a sympathetic jury. A technicality could exclude evidence. Anything could happen. The plea guarantees he goes to prison for life. What does he get out of it? He avoids the death penalty for Jessica's murder. In a trial, we might pursue capital charges. With the plea, he gets life without parole but lives." Naomi thought about Jessica, about the other women Ethan had hurt, about the 2 years of her own life he'd stolen. He should die for what he did to Jessica. Yes, but there's no guarantee we'd get a death sentence even if we tried. Some jurors won't vote for execution under any circumstances. This way, we know he never gets out. He spends the rest of his life in a maximum security prison, surrounded by the kind of criminals he used to prosecute. Men who really don't like corrupt cops and prosecutors. You're saying prison justice will handle what the courts won't. I'm saying life in federal prison for a former prosecutor isn't going to be pleasant, and he'll have decades to experience it. Naomi closed her eyes, imagining Ethan in a cell, stripped of power and privilege, facing the consequences he'd avoided for so long. Take the deal. Make sure he never hurts anyone again. The sentencing hearing was held on a cold November morning, exactly 6 months after Ethan's arrest. The courtroom was packed with reporters, survivors, and family members of Jessica Martinez. Naomi sat in the front row, flanked by Dominic and Sarah, ready to deliver her victim impact statement. Ethan was led in wearing prison scrubs, his transformation complete. The man who'd once commanded courtrooms looked broken, defeated, a shell of his former self. When he saw the packed gallery, saw the faces of women he'd hurt all staring at him, something crumbled in his expression. Judge Morrison entered, and the proceeding began. Vance entered the guilty pleas on all charges, his voice mechanical. Ramirez outlined the plea agreement. Then the judge turned to the victim impact statements. Jessica's mother went first, her voice breaking as she described losing her daughter, the pain of knowing she'd died afraid and alone, the rage of watching the investigation get shut down. He took my baby from me and made it look like she'd given up on life. But Jessica never gave up on anything. She was murdered, and for years no one cared because he was powerful and she was just a waitress, nobody important. The other women testified next, each one describing how Ethan had hurt them, controlled them, made them feel worthless, how they'd tried to get help and been dismissed, how they'd lived in fear even after escaping, waiting for him to find them. Then it was Naomi's turn. She stood and walked to the podium, acutely aware of Ethan's eyes on her. But when she looked at him, she felt nothing, no fear, no anger, just a hollow pity for how far he'd fallen. Ethan Caldwell destroyed 2 years of my life, she began. He made me believe I was nothing without him. He hit me, choked me, threatened to kill me if I ever left. He told me about killing Jessica Martinez like it was a warning, like I should be grateful he loved me enough to keep me alive. Her voice grew stronger. But here's what he didn't understand. You can't destroy someone who refuses to stay broken. He took my confidence, my sense of safety, my trust in the world. But he didn't take my will to survive. And when someone finally offered me a way out, when Dominic Reyes saw what was happening and refused to look away, I took it. I survived. And now I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other women don't have to be as afraid as I was. She looked directly at Ethan. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. You'll never hurt anyone again. And I'm going to law school. I'm going to become the prosecutor you pretended to be, the one who actually protects victims instead of creating them. Every case I win, every abuser I put in prison, that's your legacy. Not the career you built on corruption, but the good that came from your downfall. She sat down and Dominic squeezed her hand. Judge Morrison adjusted her glasses and looked at Ethan. Mr. Caldwell, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence? Ethan stood slowly. For a moment, Naomi thought he might apologize, might show some remorse, but his expression was hard, bitter. I was a good prosecutor. I put away criminals, fought corruption, served my country with distinction. Everything I did in service of justice. And this, he gestured at the courtroom, this is a travesty. I'm being destroyed by a criminal who manipulated vulnerable women into lying, who orchestrated an elaborate frame to eliminate a threat to his empire. History will remember that Dominic Reyes destroyed a good man using the system against itself. Are you finished? Judge Morrison's voice was ice. Ethan sat down. Mr. Caldwell, I've been a judge for 23 years. I've sentenced murderers, rapists, terrorists, and every variety of criminal. But I have rarely seen someone as delusional about their own guilt as you are right now. She leaned forward. You didn't serve justice. You perverted it. You used your position to hurt vulnerable people, to take bribes, to cover up crimes, including your own. You murdered Jessica Martinez and would have murdered Naomi Carter if you'd had the chance. The only travesty here is that you were allowed to operate for as long as you did. She picked up her sentencing order. On the charge of second-degree murder in the death of Jessica Martinez, I sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole. On the charge of attempted murder of Naomi Carter, I sentence you to 25 years to run consecutively. On the corruption charges, 15 years consecutive. In total, you will spend the rest of your natural life in federal prison. You will never be free again. You will never hurt anyone again. And every day you spend in that cell, I want you to think about the women whose lives you destroyed and the justice you perverted. She brought down the gavel. We're adjourned. Marshals moved to take Ethan away. As they led him past the gallery, he looked at Naomi one last time. She met his gaze calmly, without fear, without anger. Just a quiet certainty that she had won. Outside the courthouse, Naomi stood on the steps where she'd made her first public statement months ago. This time, she wasn't reading from a card. Justice was served today, she told the cameras. A man who used his power to hurt people will spend the rest of his life in prison. But this isn't just about one case. It's about a system that too often protects powerful abusers, that dismisses women's testimonies, that treats domestic violence as a private matter instead of a serious crime. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I'm starting law school next semester. I'm going to become a prosecutor who fights for victims the way I wish someone had fought for me. And to anyone out there who's in the situation I was in, trapped, afraid, convinced there's no way out, you're wrong. There is a way out. It's not easy, and it's not safe. But it exists. Find the people who will fight for you, tell your truth, survive, and then help make sure the next person doesn't have to be as afraid as you were. The questions came, but Dominic's team guided her to the car. Inside, she finally let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from relief. It was over. Really, truly over. "Where to?" the driver asked. Naomi looked at Dominic. "Augusto's. I want to go back to where it started. I want to walk in there, not as a victim hiding bruises, but as someone who survived." The restaurant was just opening for dinner service when they arrived. Marcus was setting up the bar and did a double take when he saw her. "Naomi, my word, it's good to see you." She hugged him. "It's good to be seen. Is Christina working tonight?" "She's in the back. Hold on." He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with Christina, who squealed and pulled Naomi into a fierce embrace. "We've been following everything on the news. Are you okay? Really okay?" "I am. Finally." Naomi looked around the dining room at the tables where she'd worked for months while hiding her fear. "I wanted to come back, to remember that this is where someone finally noticed, where it all started to change." Marcus poured champagne. "To new beginnings." They toasted, and Naomi felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace, because the trauma would take years to fully process, but something close. A sense that the worst was behind her, that the future was hers again. Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "I need to take this. 2 minutes." He stepped outside and Naomi watched through the window as he paced, his expression serious. When he returned, he looked troubled. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Business. Nothing you need to worry about." "Dominic, you've been honest with me about everything else. Don't start hedging now." He sighed. "The FBI just raided one of my construction sites. They're looking into irregularities in the contracts, possible money laundering. It's nothing I can't handle, but taking down Ethan put a spotlight on you." "Yes. Ramirez assured me the investigation into my involvement was closed, but apparently some agents didn't get the memo. They think if I had the resources to expose Caldwell's corruption, maybe I'm worth investigating more thoroughly." Naomi felt a pang of guilt. "This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "No. This is Caldwell's fault for being a monster, and it's the FBI's fault for being suspicious when a criminal does something good. But it's not your fault." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Besides, I knew the risks. I chose this anyway. What happens if they find something? Then I deal with it. I've been dealing with law enforcement my entire adult life. This is just another dance." But Naomi could see the concern beneath his calm exterior. Dominic had risked everything to help her. His freedom, his empire, his carefully maintained balance between criminal and untouchable. And now that balance was shifting. "I can help," she said suddenly. "When I'm a prosecutor, when I have credibility in the system, I can testify about what you did, why you did it. I can make them see that you're not just a criminal." "Naomi, I appreciate it, but I am just a criminal. A criminal who did one good thing doesn't stop being a criminal." "Maybe not. But you're also the person who saved my life, who destroyed a monster when the system protected him. That has to count for something." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just proof that even criminals draw lines, that some things are worth the risk." They finished their champagne, and Dominic drove Naomi back to her new apartment. Outside her building, she turned to him. "What happens now? With us, I mean. Do we just go back to our separate lives? What do you want to happen?" She considered. "I want you in my life. Not as a protector or a savior, just as a friend. Someone who knew me at my worst and helped me get to my best." "I can do that. Even if I become a prosecutor who goes after people in your world?" "Especially then. Someone should keep them honest." He smiled. "Besides, I have a feeling you're going to be formidable." Over the next 2 years, their lives diverged but remained connected. Naomi threw herself into law school with an intensity that surprised her professors. She graduated near the top of her class, turned down offers from prestigious firms, and accepted a position with the D.C. District Attorney's Office specializing in domestic violence cases. Her first case was a prosecutor who'd been abusing his wife for years. The parallels to her own story were uncomfortable, but she used that discomfort as fuel. She won a conviction and a 10-year sentence, and afterward the victim thanked her with tears in her eyes. "You understood," the woman said. "Most prosecutors treat us like we're stupid for staying, but you got it." "I got it because I lived it," Naomi said, "and I'm going to spend my career making sure abusers face consequences." Dominic's world became more complicated. The FBI investigation into his operations intensified, forcing him to restructure his empire, cut ties with more dangerous associates, operate in narrower margins. But he adapted, as he always had, finding new ways to maintain power without crossing lines that would give prosecutors ammunition. They met for coffee every few weeks, their conversations ranging from her cases to his business challenges to the strange friendship they'd built from trauma and survival. "You know what's funny?" Naomi said during one of these meetings, 2 years after Ethan's sentencing. "I used to think I needed someone to save me, that I was too weak to save myself." "You were never weak, you were trapped. There's a difference. I know that now. But I spent so long believing his version of me, helpless, dramatic, unstable, that I forgot who I actually was. Strong, capable, stubborn as hell. All qualities that make you an excellent prosecutor, from what I hear." She laughed. "My boss says I'm zealous to the point of concerning. Apparently I made a defense attorney cry last week during cross-examination." "Good. They should cry. They're defending monsters." "Not always. Sometimes they're defending people who made mistakes, who deserve a second chance. Sometimes the system is wrong." She looked at him meaningfully. "Sometimes criminals are more just than the law." "Careful. That kind of thinking will get you in trouble with your colleagues." "Let it. I didn't survive Ethan Caldwell just to become a cog in a broken system. I'm going to fix it from the inside, one case at a time." 3 years after Ethan's sentencing, Naomi got a call from the federal prison where he was incarcerated. A corrections officer informed her that Ethan had requested to speak with her. "Why?" she asked. "He says he wants to apologize, make amends." Naomi's first instinct was to refuse. She owed Ethan nothing, least of all her time or emotional energy. But something made her curious. What did a man serving life in prison, stripped of everything, have to say to the woman he'd tried to kill? She drove to the prison on a Saturday morning, went through security, and was led to a visitation room divided by thick plexiglass. Ethan was already seated on the other side, and the sight of him shocked her. He'd aged decades in 3 years. His hair was mostly gray, his face deeply lined, his eyes hollow. Prison had broken him in ways the courtroom never did. He picked up the phone on his side. She picked up hers. "Naomi, thank you for coming. I'm not here for you. I'm here for me. So say whatever you need to say." He nodded, accepting the boundary. "I'm sorry. For everything I did to you, to Jessica, to all the others. I was a monster, and I didn't see it until I lost everything. You saw it. You just didn't care." "You're right." His voice was quiet, defeated. "I told myself I was doing important work, that the stress justified my behavior, that the women I hurt had provoked me somehow. I created a whole narrative where I was the victim and everyone else was trying to destroy me." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm dying." He said it flatly, without drama. "Liver cancer, stage 4. The doctors say I have 6 months, maybe a year. And I realize that I'm going to die in this cage having destroyed every good thing I ever had, having hurt people who trusted me, having become exactly the kind of criminal I used to prosecute." Naomi felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just a distant acknowledgement of cause and effect. "You think an apology changes anything?" "No, but I needed to say it anyway. You deserved better than what I gave you. Jessica deserved to live. All of them deserved better." He leaned forward, and she could see tears in his eyes. "I can't undo what I did, but I can at least admit it was wrong, that you were never the problem, that everything that happened was my fault." "You're right. It was your fault, all of it." Naomi's voice was steady, clinical. "You had power, position, every advantage. You could have been the person you pretended to be. But you chose violence instead. You chose control. And when women tried to escape, you destroyed them. I know. Do you? Because I don't think you understand what you took from us. Jessica's life. 2 years of mine, our sense of safety, our ability to trust, our belief that the world had justice in it. You didn't just hit us, Ethan. You broke something fundamental about how we saw ourselves and the world. I'm sorry, he whispered. I don't forgive you. I'm not here to give you absolution so you can die with a clear conscience. You're dying in prison because that's what you deserve. And when you're gone, the world will be better for it. She stood to leave. Naomi, wait, please. She paused, hand on the phone. Are you happy? Now, I mean, did you build a good life? She thought about her apartment, her job, her friends, about law school graduation, and her first conviction, about coffee with Dominic, and therapy sessions where she processed trauma, about slowly learning to trust again, to be in a relationship without fear. Yes, I'm happy, not because of you, but despite you. You tried to destroy me, and I survived. I'm a prosecutor now. I put away abusers just like you, and every time I win a case, every time I protect someone the way I wish I'd been protected, I think about how you failed to break me. I'm glad. And he sounded like he meant it. I'm glad you survived. That something good came from the wreckage I created. Naomi hung up the phone and walked out of the prison. She didn't look back. Outside, she called Dominic. I just saw Ethan. How was it? He's dying, apologized. Wanted me to know he was sorry. Are you okay? I'm fine. It was strange, seeing him like that, broken and old. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but I just felt nothing. He's not the monster who terrorized me anymore. He's just a sad old man dying alone. That's not nothing. That's justice. Maybe. Or maybe it's just the natural consequence of being a terrible person. She took a breath, letting the prison atmosphere blow away in the wind. I'm going home. Want to meet for dinner? Always. They met at a small Italian place in Adams Morgan, far from the power corridors of Georgetown. Over pasta and wine, they talked about everything except Ethan, her latest case, his attempts to legitimize more of his business operations, the strange paths their lives had taken. Do you ever regret it? Naomi asked. Getting involved with my situation? Cost you a lot. FBI scrutiny, public attention, complications with your business. Dominic considered. No, I've done a lot of things in my life I regret. Hurt people I shouldn't have hurt, prioritized money over morality, operated in ways that made the world worse. But helping you? That's the one thing I'm certain was right. Even though I'm now a prosecutor who could theoretically come after you? Especially because of that, you're exactly what the justice system needs. Someone who understands the difference between justice and law, who knows that sometimes the right thing exists outside the rules. That's a dangerous philosophy for a prosecutor to have. Maybe, but it's the only one that works in a world where federal prosecutors can be serial abusers and criminals can be heroes. The world's too complicated for simple morality. Naomi raised her glass. To complicated morality. To survival. They toasted, and Naomi felt the last piece of her trauma settle into place. Not healed, exactly. Trauma didn't heal so much as become integrated, part of your story, but not the whole story. But manageable. Survivable. 6 months later, she got another call from the prison. Ethan Caldwell had died. The cancer eating through him faster than the doctors predicted. There would be no funeral. His family had disowned him. His colleagues wanted nothing to do with him, and the women he'd hurt felt nothing but relief at his passing. Naomi marked his death with a quiet moment of acknowledgement, then went back to work. She had a case to prepare, a victim to protect, an abuser to prosecute. The world kept turning, and she turned with it. Years passed. Naomi built a reputation as a fierce prosecutor who won cases others thought unwinnable. Dominic gradually transitioned his empire toward legitimate operations, using his wealth and connections for legal business ventures. They remained friends, their bond forged in trauma but sustained by genuine respect. And sometimes, late at night, Naomi would think about the bruise that started everything. That small mark on her wrist that Dominic had noticed when no one else did. How one person's attention, one person's refusal to look away, had cascaded into justice for multiple victims and the downfall of a monster. She'd been saved, yes, but more importantly, she'd learned to save herself. And now she spent her life saving others, breaking the cycle of violence one case at a time. Standing in her office late one evening, looking out at the city lights, Naomi realized she'd become exactly who she'd always wanted to be. Strong, capable, fighting for justice. Not despite what Ethan had done to her, but because of it. He'd tried to break her, and instead, he'd forged her into something unbreakable. The bruises had healed, the scars remained, but she wore them now not as marks of shame, but as evidence of survival. Proof that she'd stared into the darkness and emerged on the other side. Not just alive, but transformed. And in the end, that was the best revenge of all.